Chapter 201-Hancock returns to his heart. Shalulia Palace. Li Ang's face was calm. He smiled at Shalulia Palace, and said lightly. At this time, Hancock was not so calm. Unexpectedly, people saw that she was so close to a man. Her pretty face was emitting white smoke. Her delicate face was rosy and bloody. She covered her face, didn't dare to look at anyone, and buried her head in Li Ang's chest. She whispered, "It's all your fault. Someone dares to be so presumptuous, Tilda." Ha ha. Li Ang laughed out loud, hugging Hancock's soft body, and didn't care. "My lord, you." Shalulia Palace looked at Li Ang and Hancock so close, and felt very uncomfortable, gritted his teeth, his eyes were red, and he felt aggrieved. "Have you been abandoned? No wonder, I'm just a slave to adults. This woman is really beautiful, and it is normal for me to be abandoned." Thinking of this, Shalulia Palace's tears couldn't be contained. She gritted her teeth so that she couldn't cry. Her eyes turned red, and she looked at Li Ang. "Come here." Li Ang's eyes softened, looking at Shalulia Palace, said. "Yeah." Shalulia Palace lowered her head, walked slowly, sat on the other side of the sofa, leaned against Li Ang, and said nothing. "I never thought of abandoning you." Li Ang rubbed Shalulia Palace's hair and said slowly. "Yeah." Shalulia Palace nodded, feeling a little relieved. In this world, there is no traditional monogamy. A capable person does not have a problem with how many wives he wants. Therefore, Shalulia Palace can understand Li Ang. As long as the other party does not ignore her feelings, it is enough. Hancock, who was held in his arms, thought in his head that Li Ang not only had her as a woman, although his mood was a bit complicated, it was still acceptable. Especially just now, she also contributed her first words. This is the man she identified, and it will never change in this life. You two, both of you are my women, and your feelings will not be ignored anywhere. Li Ang hugged from left to right, feeling the soft body on both sides, and said with a smile. The two women nodded. "Sir, I'll go back to catch up on sleep first." Shalulia Palace took a deep breath and said sensible. Hearing this, Li Ang's eyes flickered, with a relieved smile on his face, watching Shalulia Palace gradually leave. In the hall. There are two people left. Li Ang hugged Hancock and felt the soft body. For a time, he just wanted to freeze the time at this moment. At this time, Li Ang's hands were a little restless. Hancock's pretty face was blushing, and the strange feeling from her body made her weak, leaning on Li Ang's shoulder, motionless, and did not resist. Don't move." Hancock's pretty face was flushed, he whispered softly, and his mouth was like blue. But her voice, feeble, was not convincing at all. "Charming leprechaun." Li Ang leaned against Hancock's ear and breathed. Suddenly, Hancock was paralyzed on Li Ang's chest, unable to move. At this time, Li Ang was even more reckless. This kind of touch made Hancock even more unbearable. His face was red, his eyes were blurred, and his head was in chaos. Well, in terms of body, Nami Robin is completely abused. Chapter 201-Hancock returns to his heart. Well, in terms of body, Nami Robin is completely abused. The corner of Li Ang's mouth twitched, and he laughed to himself. Hancock's figure should be the most perfect among human women in this world. Observing the subtleties, Li Ang found that even if he observed every position of Hancock, he could draw a conclusion. Perfect. Only these two words can describe Hancock. The soft hair fell on Li Ang's arm. Li Ang gently picked up a strand of hair and leaned against the tip of his nose. The fragrance was intoxicating. "You just now, did you know who she is?" Li Ang leaned against Hancock's ear and asked in a low voice. "Huh, what?" Hancock looked at Li Ang with dark eyes, and asked confusedly. "The woman just now was a Tianlong person." Li Ang's mouth moved slightly and said lightly. "Dragon people." These three words slammed into Hancock's ear, making her look dull, and her beautiful eyes flashing with a little panic. "Don't be afraid." Li Ang hugged Hancock and whispered, "Now she has become my slave. What I want to tell you is that there is nothing noble in Tianlong people. As long as I want, I can always treat Tianlong people do it. As my woman, you don't need to be afraid of Tianlong people. Now, I will remove the Tianlong hoof from your back. From now on, you are my Li Ang's woman, and you don't need to be afraid of anyone." Li Ang's voice was infectious. Immediately, Hancock's beautiful eyes turned red, revealing a trace of water mist. He clutched Li Ang's shoulders tightly with both hands, buried his head in front of the opponent's chest, and kept nodding his head. Immediately, Li Ang put his right hand on Hancock's back and slid past. The original imprint disappeared without a trace. The medical skills have reached the pinnacle, and it is just a simple matter to erase a mark on the skin. 0. See for yourself. Li Ang carried Hancock and walked to a mirror and smiled. Yeah. Hancock took off his shirt nervously, revealing his fragrant shoulders, and his back as white as jade appeared in her sight. She was stunned. The back is as smooth as jade, without any marks at all. Immediately, she looked at Li Ang. Her eyes were full of excitement. She rushed into Li Ang's arms, hugged Li Ang tightly, and said, "Thank you, thank you. Between you and me, how can I say thank you?" The corner of Li Ang's mouth curled into an arc. He hugged Hancock and smiled. "If you don't mind, tell me what happened back then. I will become your most loyal listener and share everything for you." "Yeah." Hancock nodded lightly and told the nightmare of the year. The nightmare that shrouded her for many years unfolded in Li Ang's ears. The truth is not as scary as Li Ang imagined. On the day the dragon's hoof was carved, Hancock took the initiative to escape from Mary Joa. That is to say, she just witnessed the pictures of those who were mutilated by the Tianlong people. And she herself, in fact, the Tianlong people had no chance to see her, so she escaped. As for why she is so afraid, it may be from the shadow of childhood, and the shadow of childhood will accompany her life and be deeply imprinted in her mind. Don't worry, from now on, you don't need to fear anyone. Li Ang stopped Hancock's slender waist with both hands and said gently. NLT, 42 and GT. Chapter 202 Here comes that. Yeah. Hancock leaned on Li Ang, nodded lightly, and said. Telling Li Ang about it today can be said to make all the nightmares in her heart dissipate. Tianlong's hoof disappeared, and she will be a complete Chihuahua, the female Emperor Hancock. As for the so-called Tianlong people, they can no longer affect her in the slightest. By the way, can you help my two sisters? Hancock hesitated, recalling his two younger sisters. Almost, she forgot her sister. With a lover, I forgot my sister. Thinking of this, Hancock's pretty face blushed and was shy. It doesn't matter. After a while, I will go to the Daughter's Island to help you two sisters get rid of the dragon's hoof. Besides, I will need to live there for a while. Are you welcome? Li Ang rubbed Hancock's delicate face and smiled, 683 inches. Of course. Hancock was obviously excited and nodded. Now, her whole heart is on Li Ang, and she doesn't care about the so-called rules of Daughter Island since the past dynasties. As long as Li Ang wants, she will do her best to Manchu. A woman who has fallen in love, especially a sensual woman like Hancock, will refuse almost anything Li Ang asks her to do. Well, now, isn't it time to repay me? The corners of Li Ang's mouth curled into an arc, and he smiled. How do you want to repay? Hancock lowered his head shyly, his beautiful eyes flashed, and his voice was softer than a mosquito. Of course, I promise you. Li Ang slid his hands restlessly on Hancock's body and said with a smile. Hancock groaned, blushing, and whispered, Your Excellency. Come on, let's go to the room and discuss it. Li Ang hugged Hancock's delicate body in both hands and smiled. Hancock is tall, but very light. When he held it in his hand, Li Ang didn't feel any weight. Instead, he seemed to be holding a ball of cotton, light and fluttering. At this point, Hancock was already dizzy and didn't know where he was at all. In a blink of an eye, Li Ang and Hancock were lying on the cushion, looking at each other. Hancock's eyes flickered, looking around. His delicate face was rosy and bloody. He didn't dare to look at Li Ang. His expression was like a little girl, timid. Will she hear? Hancock asked with a little nervousness. No, the sound insulation here is good. Li Ang smiled and said, it doesn't matter if she is heard, she is her own. Although she is from Tianlong, she is my slave now. Besides, she will not laugh at you. Yeah. Hancock covered his face, nodded lightly, and said. She was very nervous, and she didn't know if it was anticipation or other emotions. Relax, relax. Li Ang rubbed Hancock's face and said softly. Good. Hancock took a deep breath, trying to relax as much as he could. But in the face of this moment, as a woman, how could she relax? She didn't even know what was going to happen next. She only knew that what happened next would make her remember it for the rest of her life. Looking at Hancock's blushing face and the devil's body, Li Ang rushed to his forehead, grabbed Hancock's cheongsam with both hands, and unbuttoned it. Chapter 202 that one is here. And LT, 43 and GT. Looking at Hancock's blushing face and the devil's body, Li Ang rushed to his forehead, grabbed Hancock's cheongsam with both hands, and unbuttoned it. Soon, a beautiful piece of art appeared in his sight. Hancock clasped her feet together and embraced the front of Yuexiang with her hands. Her skin was as white as jade, and her skin was rosy. This is the first time she has exposed Kai Guago in front of a man. Although she said that she liked Li Ang very much, there was always something embarrassing about this kind of thing. Hancock, you are so beautiful. Li Ang's eyes showed a touch of exclamation, and he was intoxicated. Yeah. Hancock could only nod lightly, looking left and right, trying to divert his attention. The noble and arrogant female Emperor Hancock also has such an expression of a young daughter, which is really surprising. But this kind of scene, only Li Ang can see it. In front of others, Hancock is still the Empress of Chihuahai. Li Ang took a deep breath and gradually approached Hancock's cheek. Looking up close, Hancock's exquisite and flawless skin was as smooth and flawless as a jade carving. Li Ang slid his hands on the jade-like skin, feeling the soft and pleasant touch, cold and soft like a water stain. Feeling the strange feeling coming from his body, Hancock closed his eyes slightly, his long eyelashes trembled. At this time, she opened her eyes suddenly, grabbed Li Ang's shoulders with both hands, and said quickly, No, no. What's wrong? Li Ang was a little depressed and asked. This is almost the last step, why is it suddenly blocked? Hancock's pretty face was red and hesitant. He looked at Li Ang timidly, and said in a low voice, I'm here. It won't be so coincidental. Li Ang lay helplessly on Hancock's body, and he had nowhere to vent his blood. This was about to break the wall, and he was suddenly blocked. One can imagine his mood. Think about what to do, now I'm riding a tiger. Li Ang hugged Hancock's slender waist and said slowly, if I am suddenly restrained in this situation, I can easily attack my heart and blood, causing serious backlash. What then? Hancock panicked, his pretty face became nervous, looked at Li Ang, and said. Silly, she really believed Li Ang's lie. Seeing Hancock's nervous appearance, Li Ang held back his desire to laugh, coughed, leaned against the other's ear, and said a few words in a low voice. Huh. Hancock's beautiful eyes were round, and he was a little suspicious, and said to himself, is this really possible? It's up to you whether you want it or not, it's so uncomfortable. 3.8 Li Ang pretended to be uncomfortable and said. Well, then I'll do as you say. Hancock's face turned even brighter, as if he was about to bleed. After she finished speaking, she gradually stretched her head over, and her silky black hair slid down, covering her peerless face. Li Ang rubbed Hancock's hair and showed an expectant smile. This is Hancock, the female emperor of one of the 7 seas. The king of Daughters Island. On weekdays, Hancock maintains the attitude of an aloof female emperor. How can ordinary people see the appearance of her little daughter? Especially what she is preparing to do now. Even Liang is looking forward to it. Hancock buried his head, his pretty face was shy, and his slender hands stuck out. Although it is a bit jerky, the sense of achievement in Liang's heart is naturally rising by allowing the Empress to do this kind of thing for herself. NLT, 44 and GT. Chapter 203_Weird. Finally. With a twitch all over his body, Liang exhaled heavily, his eyes were enlightened, and he showed a satisfied smile. And Hancock wiped the marks on her face, so tired that her whole body was sore, and she stretched her body to reveal her perfect figure. Hancock, you are attracting a crime. Liang looked at Hancock's shadow and said. Sir, people are too tired. Hancock said helplessly, it's been a few hours, and my face is a little numb. I can't help it, the physical technique is too strong. When yours is over, I will go to Daughter Island to find you, and you will know the benefits of a long time. Liang narrowed his eyes slightly and said with a smile. Hancock spat lightly, his face was blushing, and he immediately put on his cheongsam. A head of black and supple hair was thrown behind him. After dressing up, Hancock showed his noble aura even more. This is the Empress of one of the 7 seas, Hancock. I'll be returning to Daughter Island in a while. With a bit of reluctance on his face, Hancock gradually walked to Liang and hugged Liang, not wanting to let go. Little fool, I will find you in a few days, why are you worried? Liang knocked on Hancock's forehead with a smile and said with a smile. Can't go back. Hancock raised his head, looked at Liang, and offered his incense. The red mark, printed on Liang's neck, carried a unique fragrance. Of course I won't go back on it. When that time comes, you have to be ready. The corners of Liang's mouth moved slightly, hugging Hancock's slender waist, feeling the other party's perfect figure. The smile on his face became brighter, and his expression became more expectant. Then I'm leaving. Hancock looked back 3 steps at a time, looking at Liang, his delicate face was full of hesitation. Don't worry, I will find you. Liang waved his hand and smiled at Hancock's departure. Finally, Hancock stopped his feet, suddenly turned around and hugged Liang. His eyes were misty, and he didn't speak. With a smile on his face, Liang quietly patted Hancock's pink back. A long time. Hancock gritted his silver teeth and stepped forward, leaving Liang behind. Looking at the back of Hancock leaving, Liang retracted his gaze, his eyes twinkled, and the corners of his mouth were slightly raised. Recalling that Hancock used it for him just now, his mood was surging. Daughter Island, he will go. However, not yet. After a few days of waiting for things to settle down here, he will first go back to the Magic Triangle, and then rush to Daughter Island. Anyway, it's on the way. On the way from the Chambord Islands to the Daughter Island, you will pass through the Magic Triangle on the way. So, Liang doesn't mind taking that time to return to the Magic Triangle to see Perona and the 3 guys from Moonlight Moria. I don't know if the materials they need are ready or not. Tatata. In the room. Shalulia Palace came out, looked at Liang, and asked in a low voice, is she gone? Yes. Liang nodded, looking at the appearance of Shalulia Palace wearing a white shirt, the blood emerged again. Hancock still couldn't stop the blood. Sir. Shalulia Palace noticed something, and her face turned crimson. Let's go. Liang picked up Zaluria Palace and slammed the door shut. Shachi's ripping off. Inside the pub. Disco followed Liang's instructions and sent Margaret to the door of the tavern. 2. Lord Liang ordered me to send her here. For the rest, Lord Liang didn't say anything, so I left first. Disco looked at Rayleigh and Shachi and said calmly. Yeah. Riley nodded and said. Shachi glanced at Disco without any favor, a trafficker. In her head, this kind of person really made her want to kill him on the spot. If it weren't for the fact that Liang was standing behind the Disco, she might have done it now. The figure of the mother-in-law also appeared, looked at Margaret, and said, "Are you all right?" "Why, Grandma?" Chapter 203 _ There are strange. NLT, 45 and GT. "Why, Grandma?" Margaret was excited, and her eyes showed water mist, said. Here, seeing her mother-in-law, she was so excited that she almost fainted. It is a feeling that cannot be described in words. Immediately, her eyes widened, and she lost her voice. "Is Lord Snake Princess also here? Is it Lord Snake who saved me? What about her? Will there be any danger?" Speaking of this, the mother-in-law's face became a little heavy, and she said, "She is now negotiating with that terrifying guy Liang." "What?" Margaret nearly fell to the ground, her expression dull and remorseful. If she hadn't been caught, she wouldn't have implicated Lord Snake. She may not be in trouble either. Rayleigh looked at the crowd and said involuntarily. Shachi's face was also a little heavy. Liang, she couldn't figure it out, so she didn't dare to make a rash assertion. At this time, on the distant horizon, a tall and peerless beauty is walking step by step. She is wearing a purple cheongsam, so noble that people dare not look directly at her. "Lord Snake Princess, it's Lord Snake Princess, she's fine." Margaret's eyes widened and she said excitedly. "Hancock." The mother-in-law is also a little relieved. "Everyone is fine, that's enough. Let you wait, let's go back to Daughter Island now." A smile appeared on Hancock's face, said. "See. Why did my mother-in-law and Margaret stay stunned? Hancock, are you smiling? This is a rare scene." On weekdays, Hancock is a high-ranking empress, and she has never seen that picture of her smiling. However, today, she is actually smiling like never before. Laughing Snake Princess, how beautiful. Margaret lost her mind for a while and muttered to herself. 0. There are oddities. Rayleigh and Shachi looked at each other and thought in tacit understanding. What happened to Hancock on this trip? Hancock, who is usually cold, is actually in such a good mood now. You know, the word smile does not exist in Hancock's dictionary at all. But what are they seeing now? Hancock showed the world-shattering smile, the white teeth revealed, the delicate face, coupled with the sweet smile. It was not too beautiful, and it took people's souls away. What's wrong? Hancock looked at the crowd and asked. Nothing, nothing. Mother-in-law hurriedly shook her head and said bluntly, "We're going to board the ship and leave here. Goodbye everyone." Hancock looked at Rayleigh and Shachi. "Thank you both for your help." The mother-in-law took a deep breath, bowed solemnly, and thanked him. "You're welcome," Shachi said with a smile. She and Rayleigh looked at each other with meaningful eyes. Hancock's change seems to be related to Liang. Moreover, it is not the kind of forced smile, but the joy from the heart. What kind of ecstasy soup did Liang give Hancock? To be able to make the cold Hancock smile, this is so inexplicable. Soon, the ship's position in the port gradually left. On board, Hancock looked at the gradually shrinking Chambord Islands, with a trace of reluctance and hesitation on his pretty face, and his eyes were lost. There are oddities. The mother-in-law was in the corner, staring at Hancock's appearance, and fell into contemplation. NLT, 46 and GT. Chapter 204 _ Set Sail. Chambord Islands. Over the next few days, the entire island returned to its former vibe. The number of pirates is innumerable, battles occasionally break out, and people die on the island every day. The Navy also turned a blind eye to this, and would take action when they could. When they really faced the tyrannical pirates, they would choose to retreat. Population auction. With the emergence of pirates, the number of auctions for population is also increasing. The traffickers, who were afraid to log on to the island because of the Navy, gradually returned to normal order. What puzzled everyone was, the population auction field has always been standing here, and even though the admiral of the Navy arrived a while ago, he never did anything to the population auction field. It can be seen that many people have guesses in their hearts. I'm afraid it is. The background of this auction is not small. 663 inches field of the population auction, they will keep their own feet. In the area 200 meters south of the auction house. Inside the house, the hall. Li Ang was lying on the sofa, his eyes narrowed slightly, and he was leaning against Shalulia Palace. It has been 3 days since Hancock left the Chambord Islands. Those things have been dealt with, and the rest, leave it to Disco, he should be able to do it well. That is to say, next, I have nothing to do here. Li Ang's mouth moved slightly, and he whispered to himself. In the past 3 days, he has completed some matters in the population auction field. Although it took 3 days, in fact, there are not too many things that he needs to deal with personally. Most of the events are checked by Disco, and they rarely appear in his eyes, so he has to trouble him to check them. Since that's the case, it's time to return to the magic triangle to take a look. Li Ang stood up from the sofa, hugging the slender waist of Shalulia Palace, thinking to himself. It's been a month since I left the magic triangle. I don't know what happened to the little girl Perona. Thinking of this, he felt a little nostalgic in his heart. Come to think of it, Doflamingo has already sent all the materials to the magic triangle. I just don't know if the 3 Moonlight Moria went to sea. If they go to sea, Perona will be the only one left in the terrifying 3-masted sailboat. We're going to sea. Li Ang looked at the face of Zaluria Palace and smiled. Go to sea. Shalulia Palace leaned on Li Ang's shoulder and said softly. Yes, but before going to sea, to avoid trouble, I'm going to make some changes to you so that you can't be identified. Li Ang nodded and said slowly. If you go out to sea like this, Zaluria Palace will soon be exposed to people's sight. At that time, the world government will have to send troops to attack Li Ang. Although Li Ang was fearless, he still didn't want to be so troublesome. What changed? Shalulia Palace was a little puzzled, and said to Li Ang with a pretty face. At least a veil is still needed. Li Ang took out a piece of white lace veil, handed it to Zalulia Palace, and said with a smile, try it on to see if it fits, I think it should suit you well. Yeah. Shalulia Palace nodded lightly, took the white lace veil, and gradually placed it on her face, with the small ropes on both sides tied around her ears to stabilize the veil. At this time, Shalulia Palace has put on a veil to cover her delicate face, revealing a pair of smart eyes, looming facial features, and her manners, revealing an elegant and noble atmosphere. However, her appearance was also effectively covered. Generally, if she is not a very familiar person, even if she passes by her side, she may not be able to recognize her. She is the rumored, missing Tianlong person. Chapter 204 _ sail. NLT, 47 and GT. Generally, if she is not a very familiar person, even if she passes by her side, she may not be able to recognize her. She is the rumored, missing Tianlong person. Get ready, we'll leave in half an hour. Li Ang looked at Zaluria Palace with satisfaction and said. Immediately, Zaluria Palace returned to her room and made a little preparation. In fact, she has nothing to carry with her. And Li Ang took out the phone bug and dialed the phone bug to Disco. Sir. Disco's voice was as respectful as ever. In the face of Li Ang, he naturally did not dare to say anything offensive. Disco, the auction house is all up to you. The corners of Li Ang's mouth moved slightly, and he smiled lightly. Sir, what are you? Disco's voice was a little flustered and asked quickly. I'm going to sea for a while, so I don't have time to take care of things here in the Chambord archipelago. But don't worry, if you have something to do, you can go to Shachi's Rip-Off, to find a silver-haired old man. As long as he can, he will help you. Li Ang said slowly, and then hung up the phone bug. In the past 3 days, Li Ang also fooled Riley with a request. This request can be regarded as the last guarantee for the population auction market. Whenever there is a dilemma, Disco can find Riley to solve it. Of course. Liang still didn't think that someone would dare to do something to his auction house. Looking for Riley is just a backup, trying to avoid the most troublesome things from happening. Soon. Shalulia Palace is ready, with a veil, like a mysterious and noble fairy, appearing in front of Liang, like a dancing elf. Sir. Shalulia Palace lowered her head and said with a respectful expression. Now that we're ready, let's go. Liang put his arms around the slender waist of Zaluria Palace and smiled. Yeah. The two walked out of the room, locked the door, and left here step by step. Coast. A huge ship is already ready. As for Shachi's 1.5 billion berry, and Kazaru's 100 million berry, Liang had already put the wooden box on this ship and transported it back to the Magic Triangle. Otherwise, keeping these berries in the house in the Chambord Islands could easily have been stolen. That is to say, 4.7 makes Liang's means all the way to the sky, and if he wants to find a thief, he is undoubtedly looking for a needle in a haystack. The boat sails and moves with the wind. Gradually. The ship was farther and farther away from the Chambord Islands, gradually turning into a small black spot and disappearing without a trace. On board. Liang put his arms around Zaluria Palace, looking at the Chambord Islands in front of his eyes. A smile appeared on his face, with a bit of emotion. This trip came to the Chambord Islands, and the harvest was quite profound. Not only did he harvest 1.5 billion berry, but he also captured a Tianlong slave, and even captured the heart of Empress Hancock. Sir, are we going here? Shalulia Palace had some doubts and asked in a low voice. The Magic Triangle location, haven't you been there? I'll take you to see it now. Liang smiled, rubbing the hair of Shalulia Palace, his eyes twinkled, and said. NLT, 48 and GT. Chapter 205 CP0 in the Revolutionary Army, please customize. A ship is gradually sailing towards the location of the Magic Triangle. As for navigators. This point, Liang has long considered, there is no need for navigators. When he did some indescribable things with Nami before, he had already obtained the ultimate level of sailing from Nami. Now he, basically, in terms of sailing ability, no one in this world can match him. Nature. He is a navigator himself, so why should he recruit navigators? Watching the Chambord archipelago gradually turn into a black spot and then gradually disappear, Liang retracted his gaze and put his arms around the Zalulia Palace beside him with a relaxed expression. Let's go, this line, it will take some time, let's go to the room to rest. The corners of Liang's mouth were slightly raised, and he smiled lightly. Yeah. Shalulia Palace lowered her head shyly, took off her veil, and followed Liang to gradually leave the position of the ship's board. The two entered the room. Soon, Liang saw a beautiful piece of art again. It was so beautiful, the skin was like jade, and it could even reflect sunlight. Subsequently, intriguing sounds came from the room. Chambord Islands, the location of the port. A warship came 08 by 08. After reaching the shore, a man dressed in black stepped off the boat. A total of 7 people. 6 men and 1 woman, all dressed in black, with stern faces, without any emotional fluctuations, looked at the lively coast ahead and approached step by step. CP0 Lu Qi led the other 6 former subordinates, all in place, arrived at the Chambord Islands. The other 6 are Kaku, Gabra, Bruno, the male lion Snuggle, the soundless owl and other 5 men, and the only mature woman, Khalifa. 7 people, originally under the CP9 commander Spandam. But because he was defeated by the Straw Hats, the world government blamed him and directly deprived Spandam of his position. Originally, Lu Qi and the other 7 were not spared. But in the end, there was a turnaround. Lu Qi became a member of CP0 and was given an urgent mission to investigate Liang and the missing Tianlong people. Therefore, he has the right to dispatch his own men to help him. The scene where CP9 regroups. This time, the people above don't expect us to complete it at all. Moreover, there are many crises. Once we are killed, we will be killed in seconds, almost a near-death situation. Lu Qi's face was heavy, and he said to the 6 people around him. Investigate Li Yang. This task is really too difficult. If you are not careful, this kind of terrifying existence can kill them all in a flash. And if they follow Li Yang, there is no need to say more. No one can follow Li Yang, even if they are proficient in concealment, they can't do it. General Huang Yuan was hit hard by Li Yang. They admit that they are 108,000 miles behind the strength of General Yellow Monkey. Be careful. Khalifa's red lips parted slightly, and she said in a low voice. She was full of blonde hair and looked very supple when thrown in the sun. She wore a pair of glasses, her delicate facial features were a little cold, and her body was tall. The temptation of her uniform made her blood boil. Let's investigate Li Yang's address first. Lu Qi took a deep breath and gave an order. The crowd dispersed. After half an hour, they have assembled in the area of the population auction. The 7 people all looked in the same direction, and that was their goal. Chapter 205 CP0 in the Revolutionary Army. Please customize. NLT, 49 and GT. The 7 people all looked in the same direction, and that was their goal. 10 minutes later. In a house. Lu Qi and the other 7 frowned, looking at the empty room, speechless for a while. What about people? Kaku looked around and whispered. At the same time, the 7 were also secretly relieved. It was their luck that they didn't meet Li Yang. I don't know, but he should have left here. Lu Qi shook his head, pondered for a moment, and said, it is very likely that he will return to the magic triangle now. Other than that, I can't think of where he will go. Then shall we catch up? Khalifa asked with a hint of doubt on her pretty face. Chasing, naturally we have to chase. But this time we have to be more careful. The magic triangle is unusual. If we lose our sense of direction, we all have to die there. Lu Qi said slowly with a serious face. Just when the 7 were about to leave. Ta-ta-ta. There was a sound of footsteps. Someone is coming. Lu Qi's pupils shrank, and he quickly gave the other 6 a wink. The 7 people fled into the corner, the atmosphere did not dare to breathe, and waited for the next picture. Is this person Li Yang? If it is Li Yang, then it will be troublesome. All of them will be killed. Hope, not Li Yang. Lu Qi thought bitterly in his heart that his task was to investigate Li Yang, but now, the person he is very eager to see is not Li Yang, which is contradictory. Crunch. The door was opened, and 2 figures appeared in the sight of Lu Qi and others. 1 male and 1 female. The man has short wavy blonde hair, a scar on his left eye, and a confident smile on his face. He was wearing a black shirt and a black hat, looking very mature. He looked at the empty environment in the room, waved his hand helplessly, and said, sure enough, I said that no one cares here, Kurla, you still don't believe it. The legendary Mr. Li Yang has left here. But Sabo, there are traces of 753 people here. Standing beside the man, a woman with short orange hair, her delicate facial features looked very cute, and a pair of sapphire-like eyes, looking forward. She was wearing a wavy Western-style pink top, a pair of straight long legs, black silk stockings, and a pink skirt, only revealing a little white thigh skin, which made people linger. The 2 are from the Revolutionary Army. In an instant, the room fell into an eerie silence. Silent. Sabo's eyes twinkled brightly, with an interesting look on his face, and the domineering look covered the audience, and he quickly captured the traces of everyone present. They're not good people when they break into other people's houses at will. Sabo's mouth moved slightly and said slowly. Sabo, are we going to deal with Mr. Li Yang? Kurla's voice was clear and nonchalant. At the same time, from the corner, 7 figures walked out. The person at the head is naturally Lu Qi. Lu Qi's eyes were dignified, staring at Sabo and Kurla, and said solemnly, if you guessed correctly, you are from the Revolutionary Army. It's incredible, I was recognized as soon as we met. Sabo was a little surprised and couldn't help sighing. Actually, someone knew that they were the Revolutionary Army. Come to think of it, the group of people on the opposite side are not simple. Chapter 206 _ A short-lived battle. Sure enough, it's from the Revolutionary Army. You are too bold, you dare to go on the road, and you are not afraid of sending a general from the Navy headquarters. Lucci's face was gloomy and uncertain, and his voice was very hoarse. If nothing else, you are CP0. Sabo said with twinkling eyes. People from CP0. Kurla's eyes also changed a bit. The two have played against each other a lot, and they naturally know each other's strength. Come to Liang, what's your purpose? Lucci raised his brows and asked. What about you? What's your purpose? It's all for Mr. Liang. Do you want to bring Mr. Liang into CP0? This is really funny. Sabo laughed loudly, and the voice came out loud. You guys, do you want Liang to join the Revolutionary Army? Lucci's face changed and he lost his voice. If that's the case, it's troublesome. If Liang agreed to join the Revolutionary Army, it would definitely be a huge blow to the world government. He must try his best to avoid this situation. Since he can't start with Liang, he will leave all these people here. Go. Lucci narrowed his eyes slightly and said in a low voice. Shave. Kaku turned into a strong deer, and immediately attacked Sabo. Kurla, retreat first to avoid getting hurt. Sabo held a steel pipe and said to Kurla with a smile. Well, be careful. Kurla took a half step back and nodded. These guys can't help me. Sabo smiled lightly, not caring about Kaku in front of him. I saw that Kaku arrived in front of Sabo and shouted, point the gun. Armed and domineering. Sabo held a steel pipe, covered with a domineering weapon, and attacked Kaku all at once. In an instant, Kaku felt an aura of death, which made his face change drastically, and he had to stop the movement in his hand. The speed increased sharply, and he retreated sharply. He's very strong. Kaku's face was heavy, and he said to Lucci and others. A cadre of the Revolutionary Army. Lucci's face became heavier and he took the initiative to walk out. Using his fruit ability, he turned into a patterned leopard. The speed was extremely fast, and he disappeared in place in an instant. The next moment, he stood in front of Sabo and shouted, Six Kings Spear. Very weird ability. Sabo took a half step back and said with a smile. In the face of Lucci and others, his strength is more than enough. The level of the two is too far apart. Even after Lucci's transformation, his strength is indeed much stronger than before. However, he is still far from competing with Sabo. The Six Kings Spear was empty, and at the same time, Sabo attacked fiercely, and the armed color domineering covered the just closed, and slid down. Not good. Lucci's face changed, his arms covered with a domineering look, he gritted his teeth, and blocked Sabo's blow abruptly. Boom. A huge force pushed Lucci back a few meters, his feet rubbing against the ground. After he stopped, he looked at Lucci, feeling depressed. Shave. Kaku and Gabra looked at each other and disappeared. Sabo's face was calm, and he slowly raised his right hand, Dragon's Claw. Chapter 206 _ A short-lived battle. Sabo's face was calm, and he slowly raised his right hand, Dragon's Claw. Puff, puff. Kaku and Gabra were knocked into the air, and there was an obvious claw mark on their bodies. In a face-to-face, the two of them were directly defeated. Overall, they have 7 people here, but if they want to compete with Sabo, they all seem to be in danger. At this time, Sabo's strength is better than that of the ordinary Shichibukai, and he can even fight against the Admiral of the Navy. And Lucci and others couldn't even shake Chiwahai, how could they be Sabo's opponents? We are no match. Khalifa's beautiful eyes flickered and she said solemnly. She can see the situation clearly. If you want to persevere in this battle, it will be the 7 of them who will die. The enemy on the opposite side is too strong, obviously the high-level cadres of the Revolutionary Army. Otherwise, it is impossible to have such terrifying strength. Go. Lu Qi's eyelids twitched, and a word came out from the corner of his mouth. Speaking, the 7 of them quickly used, shaved, and disappeared into the room. Sabo, aren't you going after it? Kurla was a little puzzled and couldn't help asking. It's not necessary. They don't conflict with our goals, and they're not our goals, so why fight them? Sabo shook his head, his face calm, said. With CP0 doesn't make much sense. Even though the two have different positions, the most important thing for Sabo at the moment is to find Liang. After a long delay, maybe, the chances of finding Liang are even slimmer. Looking at the empty house, Sabo fell into contemplation and suddenly said, Mr. Liang, the most likely place to go is undoubtedly the magic triangle. Quote. We'll set sail here. Kurla nodded and said softly. The two talked for a while, and then gradually left the house. After the two left, Lu Qi and others appeared again. With a solemn and gloomy look on Lu Qi's face, he whispered, the people above, the Revolutionary Army, actually got involved in this incident. Maybe they really want to talk to Liang. Cooperation. If Liang joined the Revolutionary Army, things would be a little scarier. Khalifa covered her pink lips and lost her voice. She could hardly imagine such a scene. Liang's strength alone is very terrifying. With the support of the Revolutionary Army, even if the Revolutionary Army and the world government break out into a head-on battle, they may not be able to fight. At that time, the Revolutionary Army will no longer need to hide from people's eyes and ears. They can show up righteously. In this way, the pattern of the world will be completely changed. Then do we still go to the magic triangle to investigate Liang? Kaku frowned and asked, did Zhao? Everyone looked at Lu Qi. Here, the only person who speaks is Lu Qi himself. The rest of the people are not CP0 for the time being, only Lu Qi is a member of CP0, just let them accompany them out on an emergency mission. Of course, just using the phone bug to inform the above. Lu Qi nodded, did what he said, took out the phone bug and dialed the leader above. And they said that they encountered the Revolutionary Army here. They even told the people above the purpose of the Revolutionary Army. After hearing these words, the people above were obviously silent. This matter is too involved. No matter which power Liang joins, it will bring huge turmoil to the world. Be it the Revolutionary Army or the four sovereigns, as long as Liang joins, this force will be superior to any other force and will have the strength to compete head-on with the world government. The occurrence of this kind of thing is definitely not what the people of the world government want to see. Chapter 207-C. Blue sky, white clouds fluttering. The sea breeze blows. A huge ship sailing on the sea and moving with the wind. Whoa! The sea water fluttered, rolling ripples, rippling waves one after another. On board. Liang was lying on a chair, holding Zalulia Palace in his arms, and his eyes were looking at the boundless sea, which was infinitely comfortable. My lord, do you really need someone to look at the rudder? Zalulia Palace's pretty face was rosy, like a ruby, and she whispered. I have adjusted the rudder, and go straight down here to reach the destination. Unless there are some unavoidable obstacles in the middle, otherwise, I don't need to pay attention to it until I reach the destination. Quote. Liang smiled lightly. Immediately, Zalulia Palace was completely powerless, and fell on Liang's chest. Her pretty face was rosy and bloody, her delicate face was full of shy expressions. Whoa! 943. A huge dolphin jumped up from the sea, raising a burst of seawater and dripping onto the board of the ship. So pretty. Zalulia Palace's eyes twinkled and praised. But feeling the strange feeling on her body, she blushed. This is the sea. Although there is no one around, it is still embarrassing to be here. However, there is also a sense of excitement. About 10 minutes later. Zalulia Palace was too tired to speak. Sitting on Liang's body, she spoke like glue, shook her head and said, "Sir, I really don't have the strength." Li Ang opened his eyes and hugged the slender waist of Zaluria Palace with both hands. The sea breeze slapped her face and rolled up the smooth hair of Shalulia Palace. Her eyes were lost, she looked at Li Ang in a blur, and her nose was constantly groaning. A few minutes later, Shalulia Palace was paralyzed on Li Ang's body, weak and weak. Her ruddy face had not disappeared, and her beautiful eyes were shy. But Li Ang was tyrannical as always, and after finally letting her clap and begging for mercy, Li Ang gradually released the blood in his heart and attacked Shalulia Palace in an instant. "Sir, I'll go to sleep first." Shalulia Palace was tired and said in a low voice. As a woman with an ordinary physique, it was quite remarkable that she could cooperate for so long. "Go to sleep." Li Ang put his arms around Shalulia Palace, leaning against the other party's ear and whispering. Immediately, Shalulia Palace gradually fell into a deep sleep in a state of confusion. Occasionally, in a dream, Shalulia Palace would snort and her face would turn crimson. Time flies by. In a blink of an eye. 2 days have passed since Li Ang and Zaluria Palace were on the sea. During the past 2 days, Li Ang naturally kept doing some worldly pleasures with Zalulia Palace, but it made the days on the sea very interesting and not so boring. Early in the morning, Li Ang was doing something indescribable with Zaluria Palace. Chapter 207-C. Li Ang was doing something indescribable with Zaluria Palace. From the position of the shipboard, moved to the corridor, and then to the room. Shalulia Palace's face was red and bloody, and she couldn't find Bay, and she didn't know what happened. Li Ang tried to develop a new continent. The 2 places in Zaluria Palace were directly developed by Li Ang for the first time. Is one last place left, Both, which is not used. Today, Li Ang had the thought of wanting to use it. "Sir, is it really possible?" When hearing Li Ang's plan, Zaluria Palace was terrified. "Can it really be done?" "No, is it broken?" "Don't worry, I'm a doctor." Li Ang's eyes flickered, unable to contain the excitement in his heart. "Well, that's fine." Shalulia Palace couldn't resist, and could only lower her head, and said nervously. Finally, Li Ang successfully completed the plan. However, Shalulia Palace's expression was obviously not feeling well, and tears flowed from her eyes. Li Ang put his arms around Shalulia Palace's waist. A few more hours passed. Shalulia Palace was lying on Li Ang's body, exhausted, and even the dull pain that came from made her a little unbearable, and her brows were sometimes furrowed and sometimes relieved. But she was unable to walk for the time being. After Li Ang's strong attacking power, Zaluria Palace was injured again. This time, the injury was not much worse than the first injury. Li Ang rubbed the soft hair of Shalulia Palace lovingly, took a deep breath, closed his eyes slightly, and felt the fragrance wafting from the other party's body. Without perfume, there is a fragrance that comes out spontaneously, which is the benefit of natural beauty. The Zalulia Palace in her arms, like a baby, was sleeping soundly in Li Ang's arms. The corners of her mouth pouted, and her delicate face looked really cute. "Go to sleep, my little one." Li Ang squeezed the chong nose of Shalulia Palace and chuckled. The sky is cloudless and clear. The blue sky is as brilliant as sapphire, and the white clouds are floating. Occasionally, seagulls can be seen flying, with the latest news from the Navy headquarters hanging from the corners of their mouths. The breeze was blowing, and the calm sea was rippling with ripples, spreading from the central position to the surrounding, with magnificent waves. The waves slapped against the side of the boat, which only brought a little shaking to Li Ang and Shalulia Palace, but did not affect their rest. Shalulia Palace, in particular, was already exhausted, and as soon as she closed her eyes, she immediately fell asleep. Li Ang looked at the sea in front of him. His face was calm. It was an extraordinary enjoyment compared to feeling the cold sea breeze blowing in his eyes. "Soon, we will reach our destination. The distance is not very far, a few days are enough." Chapter 208 The Tension of the Five Old Stars. Holy Land Mary Joa. Inside a luxurious and empty palace. Wu Laoxing sat on the sofa with a heavy expression on his face. The knife-wielding man in a kimono held a phone bug, raised his brows, and said, "You mean, you met someone from the Revolutionary Army at Li Yang's residence?" "Yes, we had a fight with the men of the Revolutionary Army. Eventually, they left the room and we couldn't keep them." Lu Qi's voice came from the other side. "Of course." In fact, the fact that they lost to each other was also ignored by Lu Qi and others, and they did not fully report to the Five Old Stars. They are not so stupid. Once they tell the truth, it will inevitably make the Five Old Stars give them a bad impression. Lian Ang isn't in the Chambord Islands. The man in the kimono with the knife looked calm and continued to ask. "It's just the Revolutionary Army, and it can't make him really pay attention. If it wasn't for Dorig's movement, he wouldn't care too much about how the so-called cadres were tossing around. No, apart from that, we discovered a terrible thing. The purpose of the Revolutionary Army was to find Li Yang. That's why we met with us." Lu Qi's voice became more serious. Immediately, the man in the kimono with the knife raised his brows, feeling that something was wrong this time. The remaining Five Old Stars frowned and said, "Let him continue." "Go on." Kimono man's tone became low and asked, "What are they looking for Li Yang?" "The Revolutionary Army and Li Yang have no interaction at all. What are they looking for Li Yang now?" "They want Li Yang to join the Revolutionary Army." After Lu Qi said this, he fell into silence. On the side of the Five Old Stars, the huge hall was silent. The five looked at each other and their faces gradually became heavy. Silence. No one spoke first. The Five Old Stars understand how serious this incident is. If Li Yang really joined the Revolutionary Army, the consequences would be terrifying. As the world's government officials, they are naturally the least willing to see such a situation appear. The Revolutionary Army and Li Yang must be prevented from reaching a cooperative relationship. Thought here. Knife-wielding man in the kimono continued, "Be sure to stop their actions. Do your best." After Lu Qi said this, he hung up the phone bug. Separated by the phone bug, he could hear the nervousness and anxiety of the Five Old Stars. He had a clearer understanding of Li Yang's energy. The seven of them are still in the Chambord Islands. After receiving the order of the Five Old Stars, Lu Qi said to the crowd, "Go to the port and prepare to go to sea to the Magic Triangle. In any case, stop the behavior of the Revolutionary Army." "Yeah." The six nodded, their faces firm. If the Revolutionary Army and Li Yang are allowed to meet, although they do not think that Li Yang will reach a cooperative relationship with the Revolutionary Army, some accidents will inevitably occur. In order to prevent accidents from happening, they must seize the moment. Don't be afraid at 10,000, just be afraid of what? What if Li Yang cooperated with the Revolutionary Army? The world government will fall into a period of slump. Let's go. Lu Qi and the seven rushed to the port coast. And the other side. The location of the port. Sabo and Kurla had already boarded the ship of the Revolutionary Army and looked at the Chambord Islands, which were gradually receding, with a smile on their faces. Chapter 208 The Tension of the Five Old Stars. Sabo and Kurla had already boarded the ship of the Revolutionary Army and looked at the Chambord Islands, which were gradually receding, with a smile on their faces. "I didn't expect to meet CP0 people here. What are they looking for Mr. Li Yang for?" Sabo's mouth moved slightly, and he whispered to himself. "I don't know, but I can't let them get there first." Kurla shook her head, shook her orange hair, and said firmly. "That's right." Sabo nodded solemnly and said. Helmsman issued an order. "Mr. Sabo, Miss Kurla, you can find a room to rest." "Yeah." The two immediately left the position of the boat board. The influence of the Revolutionary Army spreads all over the world, whether it is the Great Waterway or the New World, there are shadows of the Revolutionary Army. It's just an easy task to mobilize a commercial ship in the Chambord Islands. At the same time, at Holy Land Mary Joa, Wu Laoxing's mood became heavier. After hanging up the phone bug, the five fell into deep thought. They are thinking of a perfect solution to solve the current situation. What to do? The blonde and red-skinned middle-aged man looked at the other four and asked. Li Ang's strength is obvious to all. It was precisely because of this terrifying strength that the five of them were afraid, and they did not choose to attack Li Ang for a long time. Otherwise, if it was another person who destroyed the naval branch, how could it be possible for them to tolerate it so much? This is definitely impossible. The Revolutionary Army must be stopped. If the Revolutionary Army unites with Li Ang, then this force will make the world tremble. The fat man with a scar on his forehead said solemnly. All of them agreed that Li Ang and the Revolutionary Army must not cooperate. Once the two terrorist forces cooperate, the impact will be too great. The entire force of the Revolutionary Army has already been treated with caution by the world government, and with Li Ang alone, the terrible force that can suppress the three generals, the world government will be unmatched. I didn't expect that the Revolutionary Army had already planned this idea. Fortunately, it was discovered by us in advance. Otherwise, I'm afraid that there will be endless troubles. 0. The rest of the people showed solemn expressions and said. Looking back on them now, if Li Angruo really cooperated with the Revolutionary Army, it is true that the world government would be a little hard to resist. But then again, according to my understanding, Li Ang should not cooperate with any forces. The man in the kimono with the knife pondered for a while and said solemnly. Really? Li Ang has such a terrifying strength, and there is no need to join forces with other strengths. The remaining four agreed. But in order to prevent some unforeseen occurrences, they have to prevent any such occurrence. Once there is an emergency, Li Ang cooperates with the Revolutionary Army, and the next force to be destroyed is their world government. For a long time, the Revolutionary Army has carried out various movements aimed at overthrowing the world government. Now, the alliance with Li Ang is also preparing for the overthrow of the world government. If the two join forces, this world will be unmatched. Unless the four emperors are integrated, it is possible to have the power to fight. In other words, let the world government cooperate with pirates to have the opportunity to contend against this force. But is it possible? Not to mention whether the four emperors will join forces, from the perspective of the world government, it is impossible for them to cooperate with the pirates. Cooperating with pirates means that the world government recognizes the existence of pirates. Maybe it can solve the current predicament, but in the future, there will be even bigger problems. Chapter 209-Dragonfly. Blue sky, under the sun. The sea surface flickered with golden light, which was very dazzling. An ordinary ship rushed to the magic triangle from the direction of the Chambord Islands. On board, Li Ang held Shalulia Palace with a very relaxed expression. Well. At this time, Li Ang looked forward with his eyes, and a small black spot appeared in his sight, which was gradually enlarging. Li Ang, who has extraordinary eyesight, can tell the difference in an instant. This is a merchant ship, not a kind of cargo, but a luxury ship for people to play at sea, with a very large area. Along with its voyage, the sea surface was also set off by waves, rolling and beating. Li Ang spread the domineering arrogance to the extreme, covering everyone on the whole ship, and you can find that there are traces of many people on the ship. It is estimated that there are about 200 people. 790's, ship. Shalulia Palace followed Li Ang's line of sight, and whispered to herself with a touch of surprise. She had seen many luxurious ships, so she didn't care too much about it. At best, this ship can only be regarded as ordinary in her eyes. A truly luxurious boat, she has been on it. After all, the identity of the Tianlong people is here. More than one ship, they are on the run. Li Ang narrowed his eyes slightly and smiled slowly. More than one ship, still on the run. Shalulia Palace was a little surprised. Mei looked straight ahead. As expected. Behind this luxurious ship, there is also a pirate ship that raises the pirate flag, chasing after it, chasing it and escaping. The scene seems quite spectacular. The little boat Liang looked a little unsightly by the side. Front. On the luxurious ship, a group of gorgeously dressed men and women were full of fear and shouting loudly. Run away, the pirates are coming. Full speed ahead, they're about to catch up. How do you guys do things? Get rid of them. Cannonball, they're going to attack us. Quote. Everyone, please rest assured that our dragonfly is quite stable, and even ordinary shells cannot penetrate our defensive steel plates. A man in white clothes, although there was a little panic in his eyes, he still kept his inner calm and explained to the crowd. Really, I'm the only son in my family, and I have to inherit hundreds of millions of bellies. How can I allow it to be killed by pirates here? That's right, I don't want to die under the sword of a pirate yet. Mom, I don't want to be spoiled by pirates. A group of people roared, shouting in horror, making a lot of noise. Facing the chaos of the crowd, even the captain himself couldn't comfort him. His eyes focused on the pirate ship that was chasing after him, and his mood was extremely depressed. If they were stopped by the pirate ship, their lives would be in jeopardy. Although there are still a lot of security capabilities, compared with those pirates who throw their heads and shed their blood, they are still vulnerable. Unless you can meet the Navy, otherwise, this situation is afraid that it will be a stalemate for a long time. Captain. Suddenly, a voice came out, and a man in a work uniform came over with a worried expression, and said, "Our fuel is about to run out. Next, we can only drift with the wind." What? The captain shrank his pupils and asked, "What's the matter? Don't you have spare fuel?" "Captain, you forgot, we've been chased for 4 bells. Chapter 209-Dragonfly. Captain, you forgot, we've been chased for 4 bells. With a wry smile on his face, the staff member explained, "We've been running at full speed for these 4 hours and we've used up too much fuel." How did the pirates catch up? The captain frowned and asked. "I don't know." The staff shook their heads. Hearing this, the captain was in a heavy heart. He was about 50 years old, and was considered a senior sailor, but today, he was faced with such a difficult situation, which made him feel the slightest despair. His name is Yuk. At this moment, Yuk asked, "What did the people in the Navy say?" "We have already sent a warship on the way, but we are on the run, and it will take some time for them to catch up with us." The staff replied. "How long?" "1 day." With the staff's answer, Yuk's mood gradually fell to the bottom of the valley. His face was heavy, and his face changed constantly as he watched the pirate ship keep approaching. Even if he is experienced, he doesn't know what to do in the face of the current situation. "Captain, why don't we surrender? Maybe they will spare our lives for the sake of our sincerity. If it's just money, we'll give it to him." Quote. A staff member said weakly. "Ridiculous." Yuk reprimanded and shouted, "Do you know who they are? They are pirates. Do you know what pirates are? They burn, kill and plunder, and do all kinds of evil. Do you think they will let us go? It's just a joke." The staff member was reprimanded and did not dare to say a word, bowed his head, and his face was ashamed. Really? If they sit still, the only thing waiting for them is death. "Captain, they're going to launch artillery bombs," the staff said in panic. "Our ship can still withstand a few shells." Yuk's eyes fell into deep thought, and he said, "Let people launch the cannonballs, and we will also attack and fight back. If we can defeat them, it will be the best. If we can't, we can also effectively interfere with them." "Yes, Captain." The rest of the staff were dispatched. However, their strength is limited, and it is basically impossible to stop the pirates. The only hope of survival is that the rescue of the Navy arrives as soon as possible. You know, the people in their boat are either rich or expensive. If all the people on this ship died, the impact would be too great. Boom! A cannonball hit the ship's board with a loud bang. The whole ship shook with it, and the direction 4.9 changed. Ah, the pirates are going to attack. Quick, go inside quickly, don't show your head outside, otherwise, the people who will be killed in the next second will be you. Run away, run into the room. Quote. A group of tourists entered the room one after another. And the position of the board. Only a group of staff gradually launched shells and were attacking the direction of the pirate. It's a pity that their specialties are limited, and they are not the material for bombarding shells at all. Naturally, the shells were bombarded on the sea, and the distance from the pirate ship was too far away to even affect the direction of the pirate ship's sailing. You rice buckets, I really don't know how you got on this ship. Yup gritted his teeth, looked at this group of unskilled security guards, and cursed, go away for all of them, let me come. Chapter 210-Peach Rabbit. Yuck personally operated, causing the fuse. Boom. A loud bang. A cannonball hit the pirate ship from the center. It's about to hit. UK's pupils shrank, and his face could not hide his excitement. Unexpectedly, the first shell was about to hit the enemy. Now, they were finally saved. It's saved, Captain Wise. I didn't expect that the first shell would sink the pirate ship. I was lucky. No, brothers, we're going to have wine ready to celebrate. Quote. A group of staff members were excited. Seeing that the cannonball was about to hit the pirate ship, they all jumped up excitedly and were talking about it. However, the next scene made them fall directly into despair. When the shells are about to reach the pirate ship. Puff! A sharp slash passed away in a flash. Artillery shell exploded in the air, and it was blocked without a position close to the ship at all. This is. Yuke's lips trembled, and his entire face was full of shock. He couldn't figure out what the hell was going on. The strength of the people on the pirate ship is too terrifying. In an instant, cut in two, directly cut off the shells. In this way, how can they compete with the people from these pirate ships? If the shells are useless, then the only thing left is to flee. That pirate ship, I remembered, they are the Soya pirate ship. The Captain Soya is a powerful swordsman, with a bounty of 110 million berries. 110 million berries. My god, this bounty is too scary. In this case, can we still defeat them? I don't want to die. Quote. Everyone was terrified. It turned out that the captain of this pirate ship turned out to be a big pirate with a bounty of hundreds of millions of berries. In the first half of the Great Waterway, the number of pirates with a bounty of 100 million berry was not very large. Basically, each of them was a terrorist object that the Navy had to treat with caution. Now, they actually encountered a big pirate with a bounty of hundreds of millions, and the only trace of death left in their hearts gradually disappeared. It's over, it's over. As the captain, Yuck slumped on the ground, his face full of despair. Having encountered pirates with a bounty of hundreds of millions of berries, they no longer have any chance of survival. Even if the Navy came to the rescue, it might not be able to save them. This is the big pirate with a bounty of hundreds of millions of berries. Unless, the person dispatched by the Navy is a lieutenant general. But in order to save them, will the Navy really dispatch a lieutenant general? Moreover, before that, they didn't tell the Navy who the pirate was in detail. Now, when they found out who the pirate was, it was too late. And the many tourists who were waiting indoors were trembling with fear and unable to speak. Will the pirates kill us? A little girl asked in a low voice, her big eyes filled with fear. Don't talk. The gorgeously dressed middle-aged woman covered the little girl's mouth and said in panic. A group of people are in the resplendent hall, waiting for the result to appear. Chapter 210-Peach Rabbit. A group of people are in the resplendent hall, waiting for the result to appear. The huge hall was silent. With the bombardment of shells, the fear in their hearts was infinitely amplified. The dragonfly was trembling, battered in many places. There are even signs of water leaks in the hull. It's leaking, the bottom of the boat is pierced. Oh my God, it's over this time. Get to the highest place, or we'll all be drowning here soon. Run away, I don't want to die here. The crowd was surging, and there was a commotion. The floor under the feet overflowed with seawater, and gradually pushed the tables, chairs, etc. to the corners, bombarded them together, and caused huge damage. On board. Yuck was desperate. Beside him, the staff hurriedly said, "Captain, the bottom has been pierced and it is about to leak." A leak. Yuke's lips moved slightly, and his whole face was full of unrequited love. With a sigh, he said, "The leak is good, at least, it can make everyone die decently. If it falls into the hands of pirates, that is it's so painful. Women in particular, they get the most brutal treatment in the world and then get killed. It's not a good outcome for them, it's better that everyone die here." UK no longer had any hope, and even his words were full of sighs, full of negative energy. "Captain, we can't give up easily." The rest of the staff quickly persuaded. "Is there any other way we can do it?" Uke shook his head, watching the ship's speed gradually decrease, and said with a wry smile, "Soon, the dragonfly will be occupied by pirates, and then all the men here will be killed. As for women, they will suffer even more cruel treatment." Hearing this, everyone fell into silence, and no one could come up with a solution. Seeing that, the pirate ship in the distance is getting closer and closer. Everyone was in despair, the hands holding the gun kept shaking, their eyes did not contain any hope, and the sense of fear in their hearts was infinitely magnified. When they really faced pirates, they couldn't control the fear in their hearts. During training, even if you simulate thousands of pirates, you will not be more afraid of seeing pirates in person. Their whole hearts were numb, waiting for death to come. "Haha, these guys are finally going to be caught by us. This ship is incredible, the people on it are either rich or expensive. Brothers, we are going to have a big harvest. Captain, after doing this, we can bring a large sum of gold and silver jewelry to the New World, and then recruit troops to strengthen the pirate group. Yeah, I feel excited just thinking about it." Quote. On the pirate ship, a large piece of pirates on the board was shouting excitedly. The luxury of the dragonfly is self-evident. The passengers above are also rich or expensive. They snatch this ship. At least, the amount of berry that can be obtained is no less than 500 million. This amount of berry can become the cost of recruiting troops and buying many weapons after they enter the New World. As the captain, Suoya stood at the head of the ship's board, holding a knife and grinning. "Brothers, get ready. Captain, it's not good." Suddenly, a pirate came over with a panicked face and said, "What's the matter?" Suoya raised his brows and asked, "The Navy is here." The pirate swallowed and said in a low voice, "Who I thought was, it turned out to be the Navy. These guys are here just in time, I can kill them all and make my bounty even higher." Suoya raised his head, his face full of pride, said, "No, Captain, the person who came this time is a lieutenant general of the headquarters. Besides, I still think that the general is a candidate." The pirate was terrified and hurriedly said, She is Peach Rabbit." Chapter 211-Overwhelming Power. Peach Rabbit. Suoya's pupils shrank, and his face changed slightly. Just being a lieutenant admiral of the Navy headquarters made him have to be careful. The people who came this time still thought that the general was a candidate. This made him feel flustered. The general candidate, as the name suggests, has the strength close to the general. Once the general is replaced, the general candidate is the first candidate to become the general. In the face of this kind of terrifying existence, it is impossible for Soya to say that he does not feel any tension in his heart. "Captain, what shall we do?" The pirate with 6 gods and no masters asked again. "Hurry up, attack." Suoya took a deep breath, looked at the luxury ship that gradually stopped ahead, gritted his teeth, and said firmly, In any case, he couldn't let the fat sheep he got disappeared. "Captain, are you really going to attack? The Navy's warships are about to arrive. If we don't flee, 1 and 2, we won't even have a chance to escape." The pirate hesitated and said involuntarily, "What nonsense, I told you to get ready, are you deaf?" Suoya shouted, his face full of anger. Immediately, everyone was ready and did not dare to disobey Soya's order. The pirate ship gradually approached the dragonfly ahead. On the dragonfly, Yuke and many of the staff waited for death to come. Suddenly, a staff member saw the warship behind the pirate ship through the pirate ship. His face changed greatly, and he shouted, "Captain, the sea and the Navy are here." "Navy." Yuke's face was delighted, then he gradually shook his head and sighed, saying, "It's useless, who would have thought that the captain of this pirate ship would have such a high reward? Ordinary Navy can't help them at all." "Yes." The rest of the staff sighed and said, "Unless the Navy who comes here is at the level of the Lieutenant General of the headquarters, will they have a chance to save them? Otherwise, it's just to die." The pirate ship is getting closer, and the people on the dragonfly are getting more and more desperate. Not far away, an ordinary small boat was watching this scene happen. The position of the ship's board. Liang hugged Zaluria Palace, and the two stood at the fence, watching the development of things ahead. "The Navy is here." The corner of Shalulia Palace's mouth moved slightly, and she whispered to herself, "If it's just an ordinary Navy, it's just here to die. Let me see if the Navy who came this time can help them out of their predicament." Liang narrowed his eyes slightly and said with a smile. In his eyes, it doesn't matter whether it is those nobles, or pirates, Navy and others. Anyway, he didn't plan to go up and help. On the contrary, it is a good choice to watch the fun on the side. In his sight. "I see. The warship is getting closer and closer, keeping a certain distance from the pirate ship, and the pirate ship is approaching the edge of the dragonfly. The pirates on board are ready to move. Brothers, get ready, settle the fight in 3 minutes, and take all the treasure." Sawyer shouted loudly with a smile on his face. "Don't worry, Captain, 3 minutes is enough. Brothers, seize the time, but there is a Navy warship coming soon. For the sake of our safety, resolving the battle as soon as possible is our most important thing. Don't delay. If you are a woman, you can bring it to the ship, but the number should not be too much." "Understood, Boss Wise." Chapter 211 _ Power. "Understood, Boss Wise." Quote. A group of pirates were excited, and seeing the luxurious ship getting closer, armed with a machete, they were ready to log onto the ship. Women, wealth. The 3 favorite things of a pirate in life. Women, wealth, strength. And now, they have seen 2 things at their fingertips. Wealth and women can be obtained on the boat in front of you. As long as they work harder and end their tactics quickly, they can carry the woman berry and quickly escape the capture of the Navy. At that time, they went to the New World, and even the Navy couldn't help them. Go. The pirate ship stopped, and a pirate ran out of the rope net and hooked on the edge of the dragonfly. An instant, each pirate grabbed the rope net, quickly climbed up, and shouted loudly, "Brothers, the woman is in front, whoever grabs it is whoever." The merman passengers on the dragonfly were terrified and shivered. "The pirates are here, the pirates are here." At the same time, Suoya stood on the board, looking at the movements of these little brothers with a somewhat satisfied expression. He looked back at the sea behind him. The warships were constantly approaching. He looked a little confident, holding a saber, ready to block the Navy for a while. The other side. Liang put his arms around the slender waist of Shalulia Palace, the corner of his mouth curled into an arc, his eyes fixed on Suoya's body, and he shook his head. He is about to die. Why? Shalulia Palace was completely unclear, so she asked. Because someone is ready to attack him. Moreover, this person's strength is quite terrifying. Liang said in a calm voice. Even though they were separated by thousands of meters, Li Ying could still feel that a sword energy was brewing. Suddenly, a dazzling light, extremely dazzling, attracted everyone's attention. Everything in the whole world seems to have stopped, and only this slashing slash is left. Suoya, who was standing on the board, looked sluggish, and felt that the same unstoppable aura was approaching rapidly, making him unable to return to his senses. Can't stop. Sawyer's lips trembled, his expression full of fear. The light is infinitely magnified, and in his sight, it is getting closer. Boom. The slash successfully hit the ship he was standing on, covering the entire ship. This was a ship with an area of several hundred meters. But it is such a large ship, and at this moment, every inch is cracked. What's the matter? What is this? What a strong breath. People from the Navy, are they so strong? Many pirates climbing on the rope net stopped abruptly. They can only witness that dazzling light, which is infinitely magnifying in 5.7 feet's own eyes. Apart from that, there is nothing else that can attract their attention. Boom. A loud bang. The huge pirate ship was directly destroyed. Even the rope net hooked on the ship's board was reduced to nothing by this fierce slash, and fell on the sea, moving with the wind. Silence. The whole sea became quiet. A huge ship was cut in two, turned into two pieces, creaked, dumped to both sides, and gradually fell into the sea. The only remaining pirates on the boat were dominated by fear, unable to move, their expressions were full of horror, and they were stunned. As for their captain, Suoya, at the moment when the slashing attack just now came, he was cut in half, and the internal organs and intestines in his body fell into the sea and disappeared without a trace. Chapter 212-Pursuit. The rope net was destroyed, and all the people who had climbed disappeared without a trace, fell into the sea, and shattered their whole bodies. Being separated by such a long distance, their existence was wiped out by a sharp slash. One can imagine how terrifying this person's strength is. Pirate ship. Many pirates stared blankly at the pirate ship that was divided into two, their faces full of fear, and they made a noise. Captain, the captain was killed. Brothers, run away. If we don't run away, we will all be captured by the Navy. How to escape? The ship has been cut off, and it keeps sinking to the bottom of the sea. It is basically impossible for us to log on to this luxurious ship. The Navy is chasing it, it's over. ... They frantically looked at the water stains under their feet. The water overflowed, penetrated the board, and reached their feet. The ship is sinking into the sea little by little. And there are about 30 or 50 pirates still on the boat. The rest of the people were all killed by that terrifying slash. At this time, on the Dragonfly, Yuke stood up from the board of the ship, propped up the fence with both hands, and looked at the pirate ship below, which was divided into two, with a dumbfounded expression, and couldn't believe what he was seeing at the moment. 25 Suoya, who offered a bounty of hundreds of millions of bellies, was killed in seconds. Moreover, a fierce slash broke out by a warship that was far apart, and instantly killed this big pirate with hundreds of millions of bellies. Is this really possible? Captain, what shall we do? The rest of the staff were puzzled and asked. Right now, they really don't know what to do. Shoot them and kill them. Yuke gritted his teeth, and shouted with a bit of killing intent in his eyes. This group of pirates were so embarrassed that they were chasing them, and even bombarded their ships. If they weren't lucky, they would have suffered heavy casualties. Therefore, for this group of pirates, they will naturally not have any good feelings. Shoot. The security guard held a gun and pulled the trigger at the pirate standing on the board below. Boom, boom, boom. The bullet cut through the air and penetrated into the crowd of pirates below. Puff, puff. Bullets hit the pirates one by one, taking their lives away. Ah! A pirate was hit in the thigh, blood was exposed, and he roared up to the sky, very painful. Immediately after, another bullet pierced his head, he fell to the ground, his breath of life gradually disappeared, and he was killed on the spot. At the same time, Every pirate is being shot, and the bullets don't have eyes. Although the shooters are not good at shooting, the number of pirates is accumulating, and it is very easy to kill these pirates. In a blink of an eye. There were only 10 pirates left on the pirate ship, and the rest of the pirates were all killed by bullets. Originally, the pirate ship was about to face the dilemma of sinking to the bottom of the sea. In addition to being shot and killed, the remaining pirates were desperate, sitting on the board of the ship, and the seawater wet their bodies, and they no longer cared. "Captain, here comes the Navy." After the staff fired up the bullets, they exhaled heavily and said, "I know." Yuke nodded, looking at the warship gradually sailing from afar, said lightly. This time, the fate of life brought him a different feeling. The experience of life will also slide down a heavy stroke. Under the pursuit of the big pirates who offered a bounty of hundreds of millions of berries, they finally survived. At the last critical moment, the Navy came to rescue them. Soon. The warship gradually approached. Chapter 212-Pursuit. The warship gradually approached. On board. A mature and tall woman in a Navy uniform looked at the pirate ship that was divided in two, with a satisfied smile. Her delicate facial features made people intoxicated. The most conspicuous thing is that her pair of straight and slender long legs has a word in the middle, and all the thighs below the neck are as white as jade, which makes people linger. "Lieutenant General Tautu, how do these pirates deal with them?" A Navy saluted and asked. "Retrieve the advanced city." Tautu's face was calm and said lightly, "Yes, Lieutenant General." The Navy nodded and immediately dispatched manpower to quickly arrest the pirates below. And Tautu also successfully boarded the Dragonfly, carrying a famous knife on her waist. She just used this knife to instantly kill Suoya, who offered a bounty of hundreds of millions of bellies. "Sorry we're late, you didn't have any casualties, did you?" Tautu looked at Yuke and asked gently. "There were no casualties. Fortunately, you came on time and did not dare to imagine the consequences. I am here, on behalf of everyone on board, to express my heartfelt thanks to you." Yuke took a deep breath, looked respectful, and bowed deeply. "My duty and duty." Tautu nodded with a calm expression. She moved her gaze and glanced at the pirate ship below. On the pirate ship that was divided into two, each pirate was escorted into the warship, buckled with iron chains, and while walking, there was a crisp sound. "If it's all right, then we'll take our leave." Tautu moved in her footsteps and was about to leave. Yuke hurriedly said, "Sir, our bottom has been penetrated. Please dispatch the warship to help us clear the people on board." "Is that so? Visually, how long can this ship last?" Tautu thought for a while and asked. "Half a day." Yuke gave a conservative figure. "That's fine. Within a minute, a warship will come over and take everyone on your ship to a nearby island." Tautu turned around, ready to leave. "Thank you, sir." Yuke bowed again and said. At this time, Tautu 360 feet's eyes turned, looking at an ordinary ship in the distance, frowning tightly, and asked, "Is that ship always there?" "Where?" Yuke was puzzled, scratched his head, and looked around. After seeing a boat, he was a little surprised. "I didn't even find it, so there is another boat here. It's a little weird." Tautu frowned and whispered to himself. She focused her eyes on the ship, and finally, she saw a figure that was somewhat familiar, but could not be judged. A woman, wearing a white shirt, with a noble atmosphere, looks very elegant, which makes people involuntarily feel a deep sense of inferiority. Who is she? The corners of Tautu's mouth moved slightly, and he muttered to himself. "Lieutenant General Tautu, all of them have been detained." The Navy personnel walked to Tautu's side and told the truth. However, the current Tautu, with all his energy on a woman on the distant ship, did not answer. His eyes were still, and he was very focused. "Wait." Suddenly, Tautu's face changed dramatically, and she quickly took out a yellowed sheet of paper, the image on it, and the woman she saw. Just like, exactly the same. The clothes and appearance are all the same. Actually, it's her. Tautu took a deep breath, jumped up, and returned to the warship. Her expression was particularly anxious, and she ordered loudly, "Everyone obeys the order, target, that ship, full speed ahead." Chapter 213 Who is he? Lieutenant General. Some of the Navy did not know why. Their hands and feet were a little stiff, and they all looked at Tautu. "Don't interrupt, immediately, chase that ship for me. If it escapes, everyone will be punished severely. Pursue it immediately." Tautu looked anxious and shouted, her voice a little hoarse. It can be seen how anxious she is about the current affairs. Everyone watched Tautu's mood change greatly. Although they were puzzled, they immediately changed their direction due to the majesty of the other party and approached the ordinary ship in front of them. On the Dragonfly, UK and many staff members stared blankly at the warship that was gradually leaving, and some wanted to cry without tears. Did the other party contact the Navy to rescue them? And now, suddenly chasing the ship, what's the situation? I always feel that things are going a little bit beyond comprehension. On the board of a warship, Tautu's eyes were very heavy, and she stared at the ordinary ship in front of her. Without blinking, her spirit was tense, and she was always ready to attack. If she hadn't cared about the people on the boat, she would have drawn out her sword and slashed. "Lieutenant General, what happened?" a Navy asked involuntarily. "I saw that ship, Lord Zaluria Palace." Tautu's face was low and he said slowly, "Sir Zaluria Palace." Some navies were a little confused, and immediately, the incident that caused a lot of uproar some time ago came to their minds. They couldn't help shouting, "The one in the Tianlong people's disappearance case, Lord Zaluria Palace. Really? Is it really on the ship? Oh my god, it looks like we've hit something incredible. I originally thought that this adult was dead, but I didn't expect that she was still being held hostage, and she was not discovered by anyone. If we didn't happen to pass by here today, I'm afraid we wouldn't be able to find out about this." Quote. Numerous navies opened their mouths one after another, making a noise. Each of their faces was full of shocking emotions. They actually discovered the key figure in the disappearance of the Tianlong people. If they can bring this adult back, then their credit will be too great. Moreover, who is the person who kidnapped the Tianlong people? This doubt was shrouded in the heads of all of them. Who is he? Diaresis. Tautu himself didn't know why. His face was heavy, and he was thinking in his heart. She just saw the shadow of Zaluria Palace. She didn't know how many people were on the ship. However, she believes that the answer will be revealed soon. The speed of warships is naturally not comparable to ordinary ships. Tautu looked at the warship and the ship in front of her getting closer and closer, and her mood was also a little surging. She waved her hand and shouted, "Everyone, get ready." "Yes, Lieutenant General." All navies armed with guns, ready for the next big battle. They are a little nervous, and they are about to face the culprit who kidnapped the Tianlong people, so they will inevitably feel a little uneasy. However, the existence of Lieutenant General Peach Rabbit gave them a little confidence for these little rookies. The distance is getting closer. Tautu pulled out the famous sword from his waist, with a fierce aura on his face. All over the body, a sword energy emerged spontaneously, covering the audience. Although her strength is not as good as that of a general, she is already infinitely close to a general. "Let me see, who dares to kidnap the Tianlong people?" Tautu's face was solemn, and his eyes were fixed on the ship in front of him. As the distance got closer, she was also able to see the whole picture of the ship. Chapter 213 Who is he? NGT, page 1/2. Please click the next page to continue reading. As the distance got closer, she was also able to see the whole picture of the ship. Ordinary can no longer be an ordinary boat. At the same time, on board, Liang narrowed his eyes slightly, lying on the chair, unmoved. It still caught the attention of others. But, fortunately, the Peach Rabbit, who is a candidate for the general, should not have discovered his true identity. In that case, let them sink to the bottom of the sea. The corners of Li Ang's mouth moved slightly, and he smiled lightly. The arrogance of seeing and hearing spreads to the extreme, covering an area of several hundred meters. Every move of everyone on the warship could not escape his hunch. The one headed by him is not bad, and his life characteristics are also very strong. If nothing else, this person should be the Vice Admiral of the Navy headquarters, Tautu, who is a candidate for the general. Go back to the room and wait for me. Li Ang patted the pretty face of Shalulia Palace and smiled. Yeah. Shalulia Palace nodded lightly, not at all excited by the appearance of the Navy. If it was the previous her, she might choose to cry loudly for help at this time. But now, her whole heart is on Li Ang. Naturally, she doesn't want to be taken to marry Joa. She just wants to follow Li Ang's side as a qualified slave. It can be seen that Li Ang's taming ability is already perfect. At this time, Li Ang took out an ordinary machete from the arsenal next to it. It was slightly smooth and sharp, but it was still far from the famous sword. It's just that such a weapon, in Li Ang's hands, is even more terrifying than the Supreme Sword and 12 workers. Diaresis, let you be silent so as not to entangle me. Holding the blade, Li Ang swung a sharp slash and flew towards the position of the warship behind him. This moment, Tautu, who was standing on the board of the warship, had goosebumps all over his body, and with a jolt, he felt a terrifying slash coming from the front. So strong. Tautu's throat was dry. Looking at the infinitely magnified light of this slash, the whole person froze. Immediately, she gritted her teeth, held the famous sword with difficulty, and swiftly urged a slash. Boom! The two collided, and the sea boiled. The sea water splashed up and flew to a height of tens of meters, gradually falling to the sea surface, causing waves of ripples to fall on the board of the warship. The entire warship shook violently. On the ship's board, the naval stations were unstable and crooked, and some fell directly into the sea. Jiao Hao, with a thump sound, the Navy was dazed and poured into the sea. In Tautu's eyes, I saw that the slash in front was still infinitely magnified. Her attack was instantly defeated. The gap between the two is too big to make up. Tautu was stunned, his delicate face was full of astonishment. A bright light covered her vision. At this critical moment, Tautu came back to his senses, kicked his feet, jumped up, and plunged into the sea next to him. Boom! A loud bang. This sharp slash directly hit the front end of the warship. Crunch! A crisp voice came out, echoing around. Looking at it again, the huge warship is divided into two, and the incision is very smooth. The left and right halves poured down to the sea on both sides, raising rolling waves, rolling more than 10 meters into the sky, and throwing them on the sea, causing ripples. Chapter 214_Waves Rise. Silence. Tautu fell into the sea, her head floated out of the sea, and she stared blankly at the Navy warship that was cut in two. This scene was very similar. Before, she cut off the pirate ship with one knife. Now it's good, it's her turn to cut off her warship, and she has already resisted, but it still hasn't brought about a reversal of the battle. Who is it? Who was the person on the boat, who cut the warship off? Tautu's heart was full of doubts, his eyes were fixed on the ship that was gradually leaving ahead, and his whole face was full of unwillingness. Imminent. She will be able to catch the person who is missing the Tianlong people. But just a short distance away, there was a wall in front of her, preventing her from going any further, so she could only watch the murderer leave in front of her eyes, but she couldn't catch the real murderer. Lieutenant General Peach Rabbit. Some of the surrounding navy looked at the sluggish Tautu and couldn't help but say. At this time, Peach Rabbit's smooth hair was wet by the seawater, and it was scattered on her shoulders in a disorderly manner, covering her delicate and fair face, which made people feel chills at first sight. Her figure looked particularly embarrassed. This is the first time she has encountered such an embarrassing situation since she went to sea on a mission. Get on board. Tautu took a deep breath, her eyes were a little heavy, and she said in a low voice. 657. She swung her hands, her slender long legs slid in the sea and approached the dragonfly's position. Halfway through, she glanced at the warship that had sunk to the bottom of the sea, feeling complicated and indescribable. This murderer's strength is only terrifying to the point of heinous. Even she couldn't stop her. In front of the slash just now, she was like a weak and helpless child, facing the feeling of the vast sea. Who is he? Tautu was still thinking in his heart. It's a pity that no matter how she thinks, she can't think of an answer. Because she didn't even see the murderer's face at all, so she guessed randomly, and there was no way to verify it. Soon, a group of Navy who were caught in the sea gradually approached the dragonfly to log in. After logging into the dragonfly, Tautu and a group of people were also waiting for the rescue to arrive. Only, Tautu looked at the ship that was gradually turning into a small black spot ahead, gritted his teeth, and said unwillingly to himself, just a little bit, just a little bit. Just a little bit, she could see the true face of the murderer. Lieutenant General Tautu, please come into the room and rest for a while. As the captain, Yuk was very respectful, bowed his head, CFFB, said. Yeah. Tautu waved his hand, his face full of sadness, and gradually left the position of the boat board. The Navy has dispatched manpower to the rescue, it is only a matter of time. The other side. In front of an ordinary ship, the corner of Li Eng's mouth curled into an arc, his eyes narrowed slightly, looking at the empty environment behind him, smiling all over his face. Under his terrifying blow, sure enough, Tautu and the others could no longer pursue them. When the warship was destroyed, how could it continue to pursue Li Eng? I can't even see my butt. Immediately, Li Eng threw the big knife aside, and with a single step, he gradually walked into the house in front. As he approached, he saw the beautiful figure of Zaluria Palace. Immediately, a perfect piece of art appeared in Li Eng's eyes, and the two were once again carrying out some indescribable things, and bursts of intriguing voices came out. Sir, has it been resolved? Chapter 214-Waves Rise. Sir, has it been resolved? Shalulia Palace's slender jade hand grabbed Li Eng's arm, her face blushed, and she whispered. Nature. Li Eng nodded and smiled lightly. Hearing this, Shalulia Palace was slightly relieved. She really didn't want to go back to Mary Joa if she could. Now she can't get rid of Li Eng at all, especially Li Eng's ability in that area, she can't stop, she can't resist. Moreover, Li Eng's taming ability is also very impressive. The most important object in Shalulia Palace's mind now is Li Eng. An hour later. Dragonfly, on board. A group of passengers gradually made their way to several warships ahead. It can be officially announced that the Dragonfly has officially fallen into the sea. It is meaningless to send manpower to salvage afterward. The ship that has an accident will be abandoned and will be disgusted by the passengers, and it will no longer be able to sail. Lieutenant General Peach Rabbit. The one who came to the rescue was a colonel. After he saw Tautu, he quickly saluted and said, Return. Tautu's footsteps moved, and she jumped from the dragonfly and landed firmly on the board of the warship. Her face was expressionless, and her eyes still had a heavy aura as she ordered. Yes, Lieutenant General. The colonel quickly left and followed Tautu's instructions. Tautu, on the other hand, was alone, standing on the board of the boat. But the things she was thinking about were definitely related to seeing the Tianlong people just now. Call the Warring States Marshal for me. Tautu looked at the Navy who was walking beside him, and ordered directly. Soon, the phone worm dialed. The voice of the Warring States was the same as before, and it was a little tired. Hey, I'm Sengoku. Marshal of the Warring States period. I'm Tautu, I want to tell you something, a big thing. Tautu took a deep breath, sorted out the language, and said in one breath, when I was on a mission at sea, I saw a ship, and on the ship, there was the figure of the missing Tianlong. What? Sengoku was shocked, almost fell off the seat, and hurriedly asked, "Which sea area are you in now? I will send personnel to support you." I ran away for them, and I didn't even know who the murderer was. Because, while chasing, a sharp slash broke out from the ship, which instantly defeated the warship, and I looked extremely small in front of this attack. Taotu's face was gloomy and uncertain, and said truthfully, "Can't even you do it?" Sengoku was silent for a while and spoke again. "Yes, I'm afraid, the strength of this murderer is no less than that of the 3 generals, and it is not even possible to compete with the 4 emperors in the New World. All in all, in front of the murderer, I look vulnerable." Taotu's self-confidence gradually disappeared, said solemnly, "I understand, you tell me the coordinates, and I will send personnel to conduct inspections now, and search all the sea areas, and will not tolerate it." Warring States thought for a while and said, "No matter who the murderer is, as the Marshal of the Navy headquarters, he always has to express his opinion. Even if you really can't find the Tianlong people, you always have to pretend to show them to the group of Tianlong people. Otherwise, being so annoyed by them every day, the Navy headquarters would not have to operate, and it would be enough to do all the chores for the Tianlong people." Coordinates. Taotu found a navy and asked for the answer before he knew the answer, and said to the phone bug, "I'm in the sea about 5 kilometers south of Guzla Island in the Great Waterway. Chapter 215_arrival. I see, I will send people to search. If you happen to meet again, don't act rashly. This person, very likely, will kill you." Sengoku's tone became heavy, said, "If Taotu is lost, it is not just the loss of a lieutenant general of the headquarters. This is a general candidate, not everyone can become a general candidate. Marshal, please don't worry, I have a plan." Taotu nodded and replied, "Soon." Both hang up the phone bug. And far away in the naval headquarters, Marin, Vando. Inside the marshal's office. Warring States' face was gloomy and uncertain, and after hanging up the phone bug, he fell into a tangle in his heart. Things are getting more and more troublesome. He has a major matter in his hands that needs to be dealt with, no less than the disappearance of the Tianlong people, and even more serious than the disappearance of the Tianlong people. Dong dong dong. The door was knocked. Warring States rubbed his temples and said, "Come in." A Navy soldier walked into the office with the document in hand, handed it to the Warring States period, and respectfully said, "Marshal, here is the layout plan revised by Lieutenant General He, please take a look. Put it here, if there is nothing else, you can go out." Warring States took a deep breath and calmed down, saying. He was left alone in the office again. It's an eventful autumn. The Warring States holds the information in his hand, and the layout of the army is on it. And the scene is in Marin Fando. There must be image worms here, and here, 20,000 troops must be deployed to prevent them from being attacked from behind. In addition, there are pacifists. In this way, the arrangement is perfect, and at that time, even if we really have to face it, the Navy will not have much damage. Now what I need to think about is, how did he get here? Sengoku's eyes flickered, and the layout plan on his hand was slowly put down. One look. On the reward list placed on his desk, a young man wearing a fiery red hat was marked with a cross. This also means that the person on the bounty list has been arrested. This reward list is now scrapped. Blackbeard. Warring States' eyelids jumped, and I always felt that things were not easy. Recently, a major event has also occurred in the Navy headquarters, and it is precisely because of this major event that the next series of events happened. And the Warring States period was troubled by this incident. Blackbeard captured Fire Fist Ace, the captain of the 2nd Division of the Whitebeard Pirates, to the Navy headquarters, thus winning a position in the Shichibukai. This matter has swept through the entire naval headquarters, and everyone knows it. If possible, the Warring States period is still unwilling to provoke the Whitebeard Pirates. The collision of the two will directly affect the changes in the pattern of the world. However, Blackbeard has already captured Fire Fist Ace. As a naval marshal, he has no reason to release the other party, which is simply impossible. The Sengoku can only face it. No matter how terrifying the enemy he faces, he can't give in to the pirates. In this case, not to mention what the world government will say, even those civilians will look down on the Navy. Isn't the Navy's job to catch pirates? Now that the pirates are all delivered to the door, if they don't arrest them, they can't talk about it. However, the purpose of this guy Blackbeard is not simple. Warring States was thinking in his heart, what is Blackbeard doing this for? Cause the collision between the Navy headquarters and the four emperors. Blackbeard is very ambitious. Boo boo. Chapter 215 arrived. Boo boo. The phone bug rang. Warring States picked up the phone bug and heard Lieutenant General Crane's voice. Warring States, is there an order to summon Chiwahai? Yes. The Warring States period exhaled heavily, nodded solemnly, and said. In any case, the next battle is inevitable, and there is no way to avoid it, only the first battle. The initiative is in their hands, and they can completely take advantage of the terrain to defeat the enemy. Although the enemy is Whitebeard, who is known as the strongest man in the world, Sengoku will not be timid. Otherwise, with the appearance of Liang, the title of the strongest man in the world, I am afraid, will change hands. Liang. Thinking of Liang's side, the Warring States period was even more silent. This person, forcing the Navy to bow its head, is the Navy's nightmare. Hopefully, this incident has nothing to do with Liang, otherwise, it will be even more troublesome. For a while, the Warring States head was in chaos. There are two major things left and right, which annoy him. The battle with the four emperors is imminent and must be fully prepared before it can be dealt with. At this moment, the disappearance of the Tianlong people actually allowed Taotu to capture the traces of the Tianlong people, which cannot be ignored. At least, the search for the Tianlong people must be required. Otherwise, the group of Tianlong people will never give up easily. Looks like, Mary Joa, a Draco is dead. Warring States whispered to himself, he can still know about this kind of thing. In this regard, he has been able to predict that the future sea will be more chaotic. Even the Tianlong people are dead, who else can't I? The person who killed the Tianlong people is said to be a trusted killer slave who hid for 20 years just to kill the Tianlong people. 0. But this matter, Warring States still felt unusual, should not be so simple on the surface. The death of the Celestial Dragon, the disappearance of the Celestial Dragon, the movement of Blackbeard, and the upcoming battle with the four emperors made the Warring States feel increasingly heavy. ... Magic Triangle. Misty. An ordinary ship came in. On board. Liang put his arms around the slender waist of Shalulia Palace and introduced with a smile, this is the rumored magical triangle. When ordinary people enter this place, getting lost is the most normal thing. Having said that, Liang turned his eyes and pointed to an abandoned ship in front of him. These hulks are the group of people who have been left here forever and starved to death. Now they are away from this era, I don't know how many years. Shalulia Palace's beautiful eyes were a little surprised, looking at the surrounding fog, and couldn't help asking, Sir, how did you judge the direction? Me, of course I'm different. Liang smiled meaningfully, sliding his hands restlessly on the body of Zalulia Palace. Immediately, Shalulia Palace's face was blushing, a little twisted, her mouth spit like blue, and her breathing changed a little. It's here. Liang released his hands, smiled, pointed to a huge sailboat in front, and said. Is this the Dread Bark? Shalulia Palace came here for the first time and felt a burst of surprises. The size of the ship was too large, and it was the first time she had seen a ship with such a terrifying size. Chapter 216 The little friends were stunned. Go ashore. Liang hugged Zalulia Palace, jumped up, and successfully reached the shore of the three-masted sailboat. As for the boat behind it, it should be thrown away as a disposable item. Without anchoring, the boat moved with the wind and disappeared from Li Ang's sight in a blink of an eye. Looking at the foggy scene ahead, Shalulia Palace was deeply curious and said with a smile, "Sir, is this your residence? It's really quiet. I'll introduce someone to you in a moment." Li Ang put down Zaluria Palace, pulled the other's slender fingertips, and smiled. The two gradually walked into the dark depths and gradually disappeared. In the dark castle, the huge Moonlight Moria, sitting on the sofa, raised his head and looked at the ceiling, and asked, "Are the materials ready?" "Sir Mariah, it is already under construction and is about to be completed." 100. Absalom nodded and solemnly reported. "It's going to see, you two, don't you have anything to say?" Moonlight Moria looked at the two in front of him and said with a smile. His unique and sharp laughter echoed around, making people send letters in their hearts. The dark castle stunned the crows at the top of the castle. "It's still quite reluctant." Hogbuck hesitated for a moment, sighed, and said, "Having lived here for so many years, and there are so many studies that belong to him, he is naturally very reluctant to leave." "Afraid of what?" Absalom was very calm and smiled. "Our ship is not small in size. At least, it can accommodate your experimental equipment. Although it is impossible to collect the corpses of giants, ordinary corpses can still be stored in hundreds of them. Thousands. Yes." Hogbuck was quickly relieved and nodded. As early as half a month ago, Doflamingo had already sent people to deliver the materials. There is no shortage of materials on the list of Moonlight Mariah, and the number is only more or less. All the materials were ready, and then they started to build a brand new pirate ship. "Wait, my lord." Moonlight Moria took a deep breath and said. Even if the ship was completed, he had to wait for Li Ang to return and say goodbye in person before going to sea. Lord Moria said it is very true, and we think so too. "I don't know, when will Lord Li Ang come back to us?" Absalom agreed, but at a loss. It has been a while since Li Ang left the terror bark. Apart from the fact that his disappearance is still circulating in the sea, there is no other movement. "By the way, what about the girl Perona?" Moonlight Moria asked. "I guess, in her room, talking to herself with her group of cute little dolls." Absalom thought for a moment and said bluntly. During the time when Li Ang was away, the only people Perona could chat with were the dolls in her hands. But fortunately, it is precisely because the doll is with Perona that she is not so lonely. At this time, crunch. The door was opened. "Well." Moonlight Moria raised her brows, looked at her eyes, and shouted, "Who is it?" "It's me." A gentle male voice came out. After hearing this voice, the originally tense three people's mood instantly eased, their eyes widened, their expressions became particularly exciting, and they shouted, "Lord Li Ang." Chapter 216 _ The friends are stunned. After hearing this voice, the originally tense three people's mood instantly eased, their eyes widened, their expressions became particularly exciting, and they shouted, "Lord Li Ang." The words just fell. Li Ang took Zaluria Palace and appeared in the sight of Moonlight Moria and others. "I'm back, how are you?" With a smile on the corner of Li Ang's mouth, he looked at the three of them and greeted them. "Sir, we are all well." Hogbuck was slightly excited and said quickly. "By the way, where's Perona?" Li Ang's eyes flashed and he asked with a smile. "She should be in the room upstairs. After you left, she seldom appeared. She was always in a daze in her room. My lord, if you leave again, please take her with you too." Moonlight Moria said with a wry smile on her face. "Nature." Li Ang nodded. He had this idea when he returned to the magic triangle. If Perona is left alone, he is still not at ease. In this case, it is better to take Perona directly away, which will save you more worry. "This one is from Zaluria Palace, a heavenly dragon." Li Ang pointed to Zaluria Palace and introduced. "What, your lord, you said?" Absalom was stunned, his eyes magnified infinitely, full of shock. "Dragon people." Hogbok's throat was dry, and his expression was agitated. Even though he had studied so many lives and corpses, he should have been quite courageous, but when he heard the name of Tianlong people, he was really frightened. This is a Tianlong person, a terrifying existence that can cause the action of the Admiral of the Navy headquarters. Don't worry, she is very good. Li Ang stroked Shalulia Palace's hair and said with a smile. Ah. The three of them looked at the Shalulia Palace, which was neatly placed beside Li Ang, and kept their expressions sluggish throughout the whole process. They couldn't believe it was true. Okay, let's talk first. I'll go see the girl Perona. Leon pulled Zaluria Palace and walked to the stairs of the castle. The two gradually disappeared into the dimly lit stairwell. See. Moonlight Moria looked at Absalom and Hogbok, his lips trembling, his eyes widened, and there was a terrible guess in his heart. Just now, then, that celestial dragon, could it be the one who has been in a lot of trouble recently, the owner of the missing celestial dragon, right? In other words, my lord, is the murderer who kidnapped the Tianlong people. I dropped the turtle, and it seems that I have discovered something extraordinary. The Lord will not kill people and silence them. What nonsense, since the adults dare to tell us, you have never been afraid of such consequences. However, you must not mention this matter to the outside world easily, otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless. Moonlight Moria glared at the two of them and warned. Lord Moria, please take 2.5 hearts, we naturally know what to say and what not to say. The two nodded quickly and agreed. They are all adults, and they still have some milk. Talking indiscriminately will bring them unparalleled disaster. However, Li Ang's actions still gave them a huge shock. The kidnapper of the Tianlong people turned out to be Li Ang. Moreover, everyone was kept in the dark. Even the Straw Hats and the other two pirates are taking the blame for what Li Ang has done. Thinking of this, Moonlight Moria and the other three shuddered. This is simply killing people with a knife, and they can wipe out those pirate groups with no effort at all. No one in the whole world suspected Li Ang's head. This was the most terrifying part of this incident. Chapter 217_Peach Rabbit is here. Magic Triangle location, foggy. Being in a dim environment all the year round makes people unable to distinguish the sense of direction. At this time, a warship sailed into the Magic Triangle. On the board of the ship, stood a Vice Admiral of the Navy headquarters. At first glance, she turned out to be a peach rabbit. Temporary mission, call Chiwahai. It just so happens that I'm here. The corners of Tautu's mouth moved slightly, and she whispered to herself. She was about to return to the Navy headquarters, but she didn't expect that the Warring States Marshal had given her this task, and asked her to rush to the Magic Triangle, and let Moonlight Moria, one of the Seven Seas, rush to the Holy Land Mary Joa. Lieutenant General Tautu, we have entered the Magic Triangle. There is a fog ahead. I am afraid that the sense of direction will be confused, and the navigator will not be able to distinguish the sense of direction. A navy came hurriedly reported. Go in one direction. Tautu is also an experienced veteran. After giving the order, he looked around with his eyes and felt a little emotional. Suddenly, Tautu's pupils shrank, and she saw an ordinary boat in the distance, disappearing in front of her eyes, which caused a huge change in her expression. This ship is the ship that kidnapped the dragons. In an instant, Tautu became nervous, and lost his 25th voice. Go to that position. Immediately. Yes, Lieutenant General. A group of Navy hurriedly agreed, not daring to disobey Tautu's intentions. Actually, I bumped into it here. This time, I must not let it go. Tautu took a deep breath, her tone became heavy, and she whispered. In any case, this time, she has to see the true face of this murderer. The warship drove forward and opened to sea waters at an extremely fast speed. Inside the castle. Li Ang was lying on the soft chair, hugging from left to right. Two exquisite works of art appeared in his eyes, which made him feel a burst of sour mood. Perona and Zalulia Palace also got to know each other initially. Under the promotion of Liang, the relationship between the two women gradually became friendly and they could talk about everything. At this time, Liang took the lead. At this time, the two women closed their eyes slightly, and their expressions looked particularly tired. How can ordinary people withstand Liang's physical strength? Liang's physical strength is inexhaustible, and energy is also inexhaustible. Even with 3,000 harem beauties, Liang might not be cowardly. It's just that I don't have so much time to contact them one by one. Sir, you are back. Perona grabbed Liang's arm and whispered. Obviously, it was a little unbearable for her to wait, thinking about Liang's figure every day, unable to extricate herself. Didn't I come back? Liang rubbed Perona's delicate face and smiled. It's rare to come back. In the future, I will take you wherever I go, don't worry. But now, you have to make me comfortable. Yeah. Perona's pretty face blushed, and she supported her body with difficulty. For a while, there was an intriguing sound from the whole room. The central hall of the castle. Moonlight Moria and the other three are talking. When is the best time to go to sea? Suddenly, the crows in the sky screamed. Well. Moonlight Moria raised her brows and said, someone is here again. Who is the one who came this time? Is it the one who entered here by mistake? Is anyone here? Chapter 217 _ Peach and Rabbit are here. Is anyone here? Both Hogbag and Absalom were a little surprised. The magic triangle is very broad, and it is also a kind of good luck to be able to find the horror bark. Under normal circumstances, 90% of people will die in the magic triangle, starved to death. And the remaining 10% will reach the horror bark and survive. Let's go and see who the guests are. We are about to go to sea, but we can't let these guys disturb our mood to go to sea. Moonlight Moria stood up from the sofa, the corners of his mouth curled into an arc, with a meaningful smile. Especially, don't let them influence Lord Liang. Hogbag and Absalom's smiles were even more meaningful, said. That's right, let's leave the castle to the three of them, Lord Liang. Moonlight Moria nodded, and gradually walked out of the castle with Absalom and Hogbark. As soon as he walked out of the castle, he was greeted by a dim environment. It was foggy and the whole environment was dark, like night. But in fact, the atmosphere here is like this every day, and there will be no such situation as daybreak. The three gradually walked to the shore. At the same time, a warship is infinitely enlarged in their sight. Navy. Moonlight Moria's pupils shrank, somewhat surprised. Why do people from the Navy come here? Could it be that they found your lord? No, even if it happened, they wouldn't be able to send so many people. This is only a warship. Lord Liang can knock them over with one hand. Absalom has a blind admiration for Liang, said. But his confidence is also justified. Liang's ability to suppress the Navy means that the generals of the Navy can't help Liang. Now, just dispatching a warship, it's like doing something to Liang. This is a joke. So, they came to us. Hogbak frowned and said with some fear. It is not a good thing to meet the Navy here. He has tried too many human experiments. If he is found out by the Navy, I am afraid that he will be sentenced to life imprisonment. Even in 847, he was detained in Pushan City for the second half of his life. Thinking of this, Hogbak felt nervous and scared for a while, took a deep breath, and then gradually calmed down. Don't worry, with Lord Liang here, who would dare to be presumptuous? Absalom patted Hogbak on the shoulder and said. This is the chassis covered by Liang, who dares to be presumptuous here. Even if the admiral of the Navy headquarters comes over, he has to nod and bow. Immediately, Hogbark was slightly relieved, nodded and said, indeed, under the shock of Lord Liang, how dare people in the Navy act rashly? Just look, what are they here for? Moonlight Moria's eyelids jumped, and she always felt that things were not easy. The warship arrived at the terrifying bark. Was it because it entered it by mistake? It stands to reason that the probability of such existence is very low, but it is not impossible. On the boat, a tall woman in a navy uniform appeared in Moonlight Moria's sight. He frowned. This woman is very familiar. Lieutenant Admiral of the Navy Headquarters, Admiral Candidate, Peach Rabbit. Moonlight Moria's expression changed slightly, and she said in a low voice. Lieutenant General, Alternate General. Kogak and Absalom lost their voices. This time, they had to be careful. Unexpectedly, there is actually a person who is infinitely close to the general. Chapter 218-Chiwahai Summoning Order. The position of the warship parked on the shore. Tautu and many navies landed from the shipboard and walked to the front position step by step. As early as when Moonlight Moria and others discovered Tautu, the other party had also discovered them. The eyes of the two exchanged, and their eyes were a bit dignified. Moonlight Moria felt dignified towards Tautu, while Tautu had other things in mind and didn't know what to think. Mr. Moonlight Moria, one of the 7 seas under the king, isn't it? Tautu walked to Moonlight Moria with a calm face and asked. Exactly. Moonlight Moria nodded. The huge size allowed him to look down at Tautu condescendingly, expressionless and without any emotional fluctuations. The Navy headquarters issued a summoning order for Shichibukai, so let me personally escort you to marry Joa. I don't know, what is your opinion? Tautu straight to the point, without too many words, said. Chiwahai summoning order. Moonlight Moria frowned, feeling a little ridiculous. The former Bartholomew Bear, who wanted to get rid of his position, now wants to invite him to marry Joa again, which is simply a joke. Is he really so worthless? Can people be dispatched at will? Yes. Tautu's delicate face has no emotion, said. On this trip, she came along the ordinary wooden boat, but she did not expect to arrive at the horror bark by such a coincidence, which made her feel vigilant. Is there any connection between the terrifying bark and the disappearance of the Tianlong people? But this is just speculation. She has no way of verifying whether the ship flowed from the position of the terror bark. In the end, she couldn't see the ship for the second time, and many things could only rely on speculation. Speculation is always speculation and there is no real answer. Aside. Hogbok and Absalom shrank behind Moonlight Moria in fear, not daring to face Tautu, the Lieutenant General of the Navy headquarters. After all, the two of them are not good people. They will definitely feel timid when they are caught directly by the Lieutenant General of the Navy. As the saying goes, being a thief with a guilty conscience is what the two of them are doing right now. One has done human research, and the other has done a lot of evil. Under normal circumstances, if this kind of person is exposed to these things, Tautu will naturally not be soft-hearted, and will directly arrest the two. In particular, Hogbok, conducting human experiments is already considered a very bad behavior. Mr. Moonlight Moria, you can prepare for 3 days, diaresis. Tautu took a deep breath and tried to make his voice as gentle as possible, said. 3 days. Moonlight Moria's eyes flickered, and he was hesitating now. Are you going to participate in this summons? If he doesn't go, it completely means that he has nothing to do with Chiwahai. But if he goes, it will also mess up his original plan to sail to the sea. Rejecting Tautu on the spot will only cause more trouble and disputes. It is undeniable that now he refuses. It is easy to be associated with the idea that he wants to go to sea again. It was discovered just after going out to sea, which is very bad. It is equivalent to setting up the enemy of the Navy headquarters before sailing. Chapter 218-Chiwahai Summoning Order. It is equivalent to setting up the enemy of the Navy headquarters before sailing. If they are particularly concerned, I am afraid that it will also be a problem for them to go to the New World. 3 days. Moonlight Moria narrowed his eyes slightly, revealing a unique and sharp laughter, and said bluntly, then you, just wait for me here for 3 days. I need 3 days to prepare something. I think, you guys no comments. Nature. Tautu nodded calmly and said. Subsequently. Moonlight Moria led Absalom and Hogbark to gradually leave the shore and return to the castle. At the same time, he also asked Li Yang's opinion to see what Li Yang said. Looking at the backs of Moonlight Moria and others leaving, Tautu fell into contemplation. Maimu, with a somewhat meaningful look, looked around and looked at the surrounding environment. Lieutenant General Tautu, shall we wait here for 3 days? A Navy soldier asked in a low voice. As it happens, these 3 days are enough for me to investigate some things. I just hope he doesn't agree too quickly. Otherwise, I'll have time to investigate some things. A deep smile appeared on Tautu's face and said. Ever since she saw that ship appear here, she couldn't help but want to find the real murderer. Who was it that kidnapped the Tianlong people? She had to find out why. Although she doesn't think she has the ability to contend, at least, she can provide the world government with who exactly took the Tianlong people. This is enough. Seeing that the silhouettes of Moonlight Moria and others disappeared without a trace, Tautu immediately ordered the staff, saying, Diaresis, you wait here, I'll go and see. Lieutenant General Tautu, be careful. A group of Navy was a little nervous and said. After all, what is said here is also the chassis of Chiwahai. Here, even if Tautu is a lieutenant general, there is a possibility that he may be killed. Here, no one can kill me, even moonlight magic is not qualified for this. The above order also has a second meaning. If the moonlight magic does not agree, it means that his heart as a pirate is not dead, and I can represent the Navy headquarters and arrest him. If he is unified, then everyone will live in peace. So, half of the reasons why I am here, not only because of the proximity, but also to capture the magic of moonlight. After finishing speaking, Tautu stomped both feet and fled directly into the darkness. The rest of the Navy looked at each other, and this gloomy environment really impacted their inner defenses, making their spines wet with cold sweat. Good ones. The Lieutenant General is gone, what should we do? Are you on standby? A Navy soldier asked weakly. The rest scoffed and reprimanded. What else can we do? The Lieutenant General told us to wait, and we will wait. If you disobey, you will lose your head. I think you don't want to die. Forget it, let's stay here. Anyway, there won't be any danger, right? Right. Quote. A group of navies looked nervous while comforting themselves. The surrounding environment is too gloomy, and they can keep calm, even if they have a very good psychological quality. Ordinary navy can't survive a day here. And they have to stay here for 3 days. Immediately, a group of navies gradually returned to the warship to avoid causing some ominous things on this island, hugging together, and being on guard at all times. Chapter 219 Meeting in the Castle. Inside the Dread Bark. In the dark environment, the surrounding trees are forested, and there is not much sunlight, but the plants here can still grow normally. You can see how weird the environment here is. Tautu was walking around in this dim environment. She was looking for clues about the ship. It's just that with a single ship, how could she find clues? This is undoubtedly something that is simply impossible to find a needle in a haystack. And this moment. Just for this chance, Tautu is looking for footprints. As long as it is a footprint that has appeared recently, she can identify it as the murderer. You know, the horror bark, few people appear on weekdays. Therefore, as long as the latest footprints, in addition to Moonlight Moria and others, there are women's footprints, it can explain the problem. Thinking of this, Peach Rabbit froze, his expression became very soothing, he exhaled heavily, his eyes twinkled, and he looked forward. She moved her footsteps and gradually approached the darker area ahead. As the so-called art master is bold, she doesn't care about any danger she encounters here. Even if Moonlight Moria touches her, she won't care. Because of her own 25 strength, she is no weaker than Moonlight Moria. Not to mention, this sailboat was transformed because of Moonlight Moria. Ow! Zombies emerged from the ground, and the soil became soft. Their eyes hit Tautu's body, roared, and quickly launched an attack, without hesitation, and without paying attention to Tautu's strength. Anyway, in the head of a zombie, it is enough to just have the murderous instinct. These zombies have no effect on Tautu at all. Too weak. The corners of Tautu's mouth moved slightly, holding a famous knife, and slashing it down. Puff, puff, puff. The heads of the zombies rolled on the ground, completely losing their ability to move. Some had their legs cut off, but they still kept walking on the ground, which is very impressive. Although Tautu had never seen these scenes, she couldn't be surprised. At most, she was just a little curious, that's all. Where is the murderer? Tautu's eyes flickered, and after eliminating the zombie, he continued to walk forward. The soil under my feet was a little muddy, and it seemed a little difficult to walk on my feet. But what made Tautu excited was the dirt under her feet. I see. She squatted down and carefully observed the soil on the ground to see if there were any traces she was looking for. Although the environment is a little dark, through the slightly bright halo, you can still see traces of the ground. Women's footprints. Tautu's pupils shrank, a hint of excitement. But soon, after checking it again, she shook her head helplessly. There are more than one footprints of a woman, this is not her goal. Here are the footprints of two women, and the footprints have existed for a long time, and even the imprints have solidified. This has nothing to do with the disappearance of the Tianlong people she is tracking. After putting aside this clue, Tautu continued to walk forward, pushing aside the obstructing leaves with both hands, and the water mist fell on her palms, icy and cold. It has not been exposed to the sun all the year round, so everything here is mainly cold and dark. Most people don't dare to stay here for too long. Only a daring person like Tautu would dare to walk around here recklessly, without having to worry about provoking something terrible here. In her words, yes. There is no such thing as weird in this world. There are only devil fruits. Chapter 219-Meeting in the Castle. There are only devil fruits. No matter how weird it is, it could be man-made. This is... Suddenly, Tautu's footsteps stopped, and she reached out and wiped the soil under her feet. Footprints are new. And it's less than a day away from now. This slump is obviously a trace that appeared not long after she arrived. In an instant, Tautu's expression became excited, and he always felt that he was getting closer and closer to the truth. Immediately, she followed the footprints all the way to the front, as if her hands cleared a layer of fog, and the route became clear. Her footsteps were steady, holding a famous sword, and her expression was alert. In the fog, in the castle. Li Ang was sitting on the sofa, with Corona on the left and Shalulia Palace on the right, looking at Moonlight Maria in front of him with a smile on his face. That is to say, the world government invites you to the Holy Land Mary Joa. Li Ang narrowed his eyes slightly and smiled. Since the world government has initiated the summoning order of Chiwahai, it means that that thing is about to happen. The collision between the four emperors' Whitebeard pirates and the Navy headquarters is inevitable. My lord, do you think I should go or not? Moonlight Moria was a little restrained and couldn't help but ask, his eyes fixed on Li Ang. If you want, don't go. The corner of Li Ang's mouth moved slightly, recalling the scene in the original book where Moonlight Moria was attacked together, and shook his head. He said again, if you go, you will be attacked as a living target. However, it is not impossible for you to go, but before that, you have to put my name on it. In this way, a lot of unnecessary troubles can be avoided. As long as Li Ang's name is called, the people from the world government will never dare to act rashly. They couldn't bear it. They could bear the attack of the four emperors, and then bear the attack from Li Ang. Therefore, no matter how useless Moonlight Maria is and how unacceptable his actions are, the world government will still be able to endure him for a period of time. I called my name. Come to think of it, this guy Doflamingo doesn't dare to do anything to you. The world government, let alone say more. The corner of Li Ang's mouth drew an arc, and he was still very confident in his influence. If Doflamingo wants to attack Moonlight Moria, he has to see who is standing behind Moonlight Moria. Once the Moonlight 500 Moria put Li Eng's name on it, Doflamingo would naturally not be able to do anything to him again. This was a blow to Li Eng's face, and there would be endless troubles. Well. At this moment, Li Eng's expression changed slightly, and he said with a smile, unexpectedly, we also welcomed a rare guest. Sir? Moonlight Moria asked with a puzzled face. That is, the alternate general you mentioned, Tautu. Unexpectedly, she came here alone. It's really rare, rare. Li Eng laughed and didn't care at all. She came alone. Moonlight Moria frowned, a little surprised, but still with a bit of anger, and said, she actually stepped into this place without permission. My lord, I will drive her away. No, you go back first, I'll leave it here. I want to see what tricks she can do. Li Eng waved his hand and said bluntly. Although there was some hesitation, Moonlight Moria and the other three left the castle. Li Eng said softly to the two women of Perona and Zalulia Palace beside him, go back to your room too. Yeah. The two women nodded obediently and gradually left. In the empty hall, Li Eng was left alone on the sofa, looking in the direction of the gate, drinking wine, waiting for the arrival of Tautu. Crunch. The door was pushed open. The figure of Tautu appeared in Li Eng's sight. Chapter 220 Peach Rabbit. Silence. Tautu looked at the man sitting on the sofa. Her pretty face changed dramatically. She didn't say a word. Her footsteps stopped abruptly. Her whole body was stiff and motionless, like a statue. You are. The corners of Tautu's mouth were trembling, and her eyes were fixed on Li Eng's body, trembling. She has been unable to speak. The people who saw it were too surprised. However, according to the rumors, Li Eng's source is also in this place, and there is not much problem of access. You recognized me at first sight. Your memory is not too bad. It is completely different from the navies I have encountered before. They can only recognize me after I remind them. Li Eng sat on the sofa, looked at Tautu with a smile, and said. His gaze, from bottom to top, carefully looked at Tautu. According to rumors, Tautu has a close relationship with Lieutenant General Crane of the Navy headquarters. Is it a sister relationship? However, just looking at Tautu's age, it is not too young. It should be said that she is a mature woman, and she has not yet talked about marriage. Tautu's devilish figure is very attractive, especially the pair of snow-white jade, slender and straight long legs, which made Li Eng look at it for a minute. Compared with Hancock's figure, it is slightly inferior. The most outstanding legs, if compared with Hancock, will still be a bit inferior. After all, there is no woman in this world who can compare to Hancock. Whether it is body or appearance, they are directly suppressed by Hancock. Sorry to interrupt. Tautu's eyes turned, the fear in his heart magnified infinitely, and he said quickly. After she finished speaking, she was ready to take a step and leave the castle. Stop. Li Eng's mouth moved slightly, holding a transparent goblet, looking at Tautu's red figure through the red wine, and said directly, stay and talk to me, you who came uninvited, just left, doesn't that make me look impersonal? Hearing this, Tautu stopped abruptly, turned around, looked at Li Eng nervously, and asked, what do you want? I don't mean to offend. Come here and sit down, don't be nervous, I won't eat you again. Li Eng pointed at the sofa beside him with a smile and said. Tautu took a deep breath, walked to the sofa and sat down, her expression restrained and meticulous, not daring to act rashly. She stared at the table, not daring to look directly at Li Eng. Even as a lieutenant general of the Navy headquarters, she did not dare to make a loud noise here. Not to mention her, even if General Huang Yuan sat here in person, he had to obey Li Eng's wishes obediently and not dare to act recklessly. Presumptuous here, the result, only death. Tell me what you're here for, diaresis. Li Eng took a sip of red wine, his eyes fixed on Tautu's delicate face, and he asked with a smile. From a closer look, Tautu's face is well maintained, the skin can be broken by blows, and it is inclined to the mature beauty of a mature woman in her 30s. Ordinary men, the most irresistible, is also this mature beauty. The Chihuahai summoning order was issued, and I am just the executor. Tautu gritted her silver teeth and said with a certain firmness in her beautiful eyes. I'm not asking you about this, I'm asking, you came to my castle, what is the purpose of this matter? Tell me the truth, I don't like women who lie. Liang shook his head, kept a faint smile, and asked again. Suddenly, Tautu's mood fell to the bottom. Really? Things are getting closer and closer to what she imagined. Chapter 220 _ The Frightened Peach Rabbit. Things are getting closer and closer to what she imagined. It's just, I didn't expect that this matter has something to do with the legendary Liang. This is to fight against the terrifying existence of the Navy headquarters alone. Whenever he thought of this, Tautu shuddered, his spine wet with cold sweat. Such terrifying strength is far from being able to fight against a general candidate like her. If she is a little careless, she will have to explain it here, and it is still the kind that no one knows about. Too many people get lost in the magic triangle every year. If Tautu disappeared, even if the Navy headquarters dispatched all its troops, it would be basically impossible to search the magic triangle. Therefore, Tautu didn't dare to act rashly in front of Liang, and it was for this reason that she was afraid that Liang would suddenly attack her, then she would be powerless to fight back. I just came here by mistake. I was curious about the horror bark and wanted to observe the environment here. Therefore, I couldn't hold back my curiosity and entered here. If it affects you, I can only say sorry, I didn't mean it. Tautu looked sincere, lowered his head, and said. Tautu, who has always been aloof, also has this moment of surrender, which is unbelievable. In the naval headquarters, even in the face of an admiral, Momotu would not speak in such a humble tone. However, the person she is facing now is a more terrifying existence than the general. Is it really so? Liang stood up from the sofa, walked to Tautu's position step by step, and said meaningfully. Feeling Liang getting closer, Tautu was a little flustered, and she forced herself to remain calm. Liang was getting closer. Standing in front of Peach Rabbit at close range, Liang looked down from a high place, and even more, he caught the pure white piece of Peach Rabbit in his eyes. Tautu didn't notice at all, she was already exposed to Liang's sight, and quickly said, Diaresis, I really strayed into this area. Before this, I didn't know this was your territory. Then what? Liang sat beside Tautu, with his back on the sofa, and smiled. Tautu's throat was dry, and she moved to the side involuntarily, her mood fluctuated violently, and Yuexiong was constantly fluctuating, showing that her inner mood was extremely unstable. There are still my subordinates waiting for me outside. If you have nothing to do with Mr. Liang, let me leave here. If they are in a hurry, I am afraid that they will inform the people above. Tautu's eyes rolled, and she had to pull out the world government, trying to compete with Liang. It's a pity that if the world government can bring shocking force to Liang, there will be no previous battles. The people above, I'm still scared. Liang's smile is somewhat intriguing. Looking at his face, there is a look of fear on his face, as if he is playing tricks on a child. At this moment, Tautu's heart sank even more into the bottom of the sea, her mood was depressed, and she felt a burst of remorse. She shouldn't, she entered here without authorization to investigate. Although the result was another guess, and the money is good, it was still infinitely close to the truth. But it was because of this that she felt even more uneasy. If she was caught, she would not be able to get out of the gate of the castle, let alone tell the warring states marshal of her guesses. Now, she can only pretend to be stupid and be stunned, so that she can escape the disaster. However, she didn't know that Liang's extreme arrogance and domineering had already seen through all the guesses and thoughts in her heart. Following the footprints, I have to say, is it too coincidental, or is your observation too careful? There is no denying that you are really a competent lieutenant general. Liang patted Tautu's shoulder and said calmly. With a clack, Tautu's face was a little pale and bloodless, and she smiled hard, Mr. Liang, what are you talking about? Why can't I understand? Really don't understand. Or fake don't understand. Liang's eyes seemed to penetrate everyone's heart. Looking at Taotu's eyes, said lightly. Under his gaze, Taotu quickly turned his eyes away, daring not to look at him.